Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash saved Lusamine from the Ultra Beasts and she demanded marriage as payment. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Hero and the Proposition. The sky above Ether Paradise was bleeding. It was not a poetic turn of phrase. The air itself had been torn open, and from the wound spilled a light that was wrong, a spectrum of sickly purples and greens that did not belong in Alola's brilliant blue expanse. The rip in reality pulsed like a diseased heart, and below it, the pristine white sanctuary of the Ether Foundation was a war zone. At the epicenter of the chaos, floating serenely above the shattered dome of her own conservatory, was the cause. She was beautiful, and she was a nightmare. Lusamine, president of the Ether Foundation, had achieved her twisted dream. She was one with her beloved beast, fused with the parasitic Ultra Beast Nihilego into a single, terrifying entity. They called it the Mother Beast. She looked like a fallen angel sculpted from glass and shadow. Lusamine's slender form was the heart of the creature, suspended within its gelatinous, bell-shaped body. Her long blonde hair fanned out, no longer confined by styling but flowing freely in an unseen current, each strand catching the alien light. Her eyes, once a sharp, intelligent green, were now vacant, staring into a reality only she could see. The creature's tentacles, dozens of them, drifted around her, some as fine as filaments and others thick as pythons. They were a shimmering, translucent constellation of poison and power. Every few moments, a spasm of will would ripple through the composite form. A wave of force, raw and unrestrained, would erupt, shattering another section of the floating paradise. The island was groaning under the assault, metal shrieking as walkways buckled and entire research blocks sheared off to fall into the churning sea below. "We can't get through to her," Professor Kukui yelled, diving behind an overturned transport vehicle as a volley of neurotoxin-laced crystals peppered the deck. The venom sizzled on the metal, eating through it with a terrifying hiss. Beside him, Hala, the kahuna of Mele Mele Island, grunted, recalling his Hariyama. The Pokemon was bruised, exhausted, and confused. "Her power, it is not of this world," Hala stated, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. "Our Z moves, they do not connect. It is like trying to punch the wind." He was right. They had tried. All four kahunas were present, a line of defense Alola had not needed to muster in generations. They had unleashed their ultimate attacks, their Z moves, in a coordinated barrage. Nanu's black hole eclipse had been swallowed without a trace. Olivia's continental crush had been met by a wall of psychic force that shattered her rock golems before they could even form. Hapu's tectonic rage had shaken the entire artificial island, but the Mother Beast had simply floated above the tremor, unconcerned. Even the island's guardian deity was failing. A streak of electric yellow shot across the sky, Tapu Koko, a being of pure, primal energy. It moved like lightning given thought, its war cry a sharp, percussive crackle. It slammed its armored shell into the creature's side, discharging a bolt of electricity that could have powered Mele Mele Island for a week. For a moment, the Mother Beast shuddered. The light in its bell flickered. A human sound, a pained gasp, echoed in the minds of everyone present. It was Lusamine's voice. Hope surged through the defenders. Glad Ion, standing on a precarious, tilted platform overlooking the main battlefield, felt his heart seize. "Mother," he screamed, his voice raw. His powerful partner, Silvally, let out a chuff of distress, its synthetic body tense to leap. But the hope was a false dawn. The creature's tentacles whipped out, faster. Then the eye could follow. They weren't physical, they were semi-corporeal energy. They latched onto Tapu Koko, not gripping, but phasing into it. The guardian deity shrieked, a sound of pure static and agony, and its electrical field collapsed. It was flung from the sky like a child's toy, crashing into a distant wing of the facility with a sickening crunch of metal and a final, dying flicker of power. Despair, cold and absolute, washed over the defenders. If Tapu Koko could be swatted aside so easily, what chance did they have? Gladion watched, his knuckles white where he gripped the railing. This was his fault. He had run, he had hidden, he had tried to fight his mother's obsession from the shadows, but he had failed to stop this. He had failed to save her from herself. Now, she was lost, and she was going to destroy everything he had ever fought to protect. He looked from the defeated form of Tapu Koko to the monstrous angel in the sky. It was over. They had lost. It was in that moment of absolute despair that a new sound cut through the chaos. It wasn't loud. It wasn't an explosion or a cry. It was the rhythmic, powerful beat of wings. A Charizard, larger and fiercer than any Kukui had ever seen, descended from the clouds. It was not a native Alolan Charizard, its fire burned with a different intensity, its form honed by countless battles in distant lands. On its back sat a figure, silhouetted against the toxic glow of the wormhole. He didn't make a grand entrance. He simply landed. The Charizard's claws touched down on the main deck with a quiet scrape, its wings folding with economical grace. The rider slid off its back, his worn red cap pulled low. He wore simple, practical clothes for travel, a blue jacket, jeans, and scuffed boots. He looked like any other trainer, except for the impossible calm he radiated in the heart of the maelstrom. And, of course, the small yellow creature perched on his shoulder. Ash Ketchum had arrived. He wasn't the same boy who had first landed in Alola, wide-eyed and full of boisterous energy. Years of travel, of quiet, unrecorded battles against forces that could unmake worlds, had forged him into something new. The boundless energy was still there, but it was now a deep, controlled reservoir, not a bursting dam. His eyes, a familiar warm brown, held an unnerving depth, a focus that seemed to see more than just the physical world. He scanned the battlefield, not with panic, but with the cool assessment of a master strategist. "Pikachu, you feel it too, right?" Ash murmured, his voice barely audible. "Pikachu," the mouse Pokémon responded, its tone low and serious. Its cheeks sparked, not with aggression, but with a kind of sensory static. It was tasting the air, feeling the wrongness of the energy that permeated the island. Gladion stared, momentarily forgetting the monster in the sky. "You," he snarled, a mix of shock and fury in his voice. "What are you doing here? This is not a game. Get out of here before you get killed." Ash didn't even look at him. His entire focus was on the mother beast. He took a step forward, his boots crunching on shattered glass. "Professor Kukui, what's her attack pattern?" Kukui, jolted from his stupor, scrambled to his feet. "Ash. It's unpredictable. Psychic blasts, venom spikes, those tentacles, they drain a Pokémon's energy on contact. Nothing works." "It's not unpredictable," Ash said, his voice level. He pointed. "Look. She only attacks when a Z-move is used or when a large energy source gets close. She's not being aggressive, she's being defensive. And she's drawing power directly from that wormhole to regenerate." The observation was so simple, so obvious in retrospect, that it stunned the kahunas into silence. They had been so focused on overwhelming her with power that they hadn't seen the pattern. They were feeding her. "The core of the creature isn't the entire bell," Ash continued, his eyes narrowed. "It's her. Lusamine. The beast is just a shell, an amplifier. We don't need to destroy it. We need to get her out. We tried." Gladion shot back, striding forward, his anger a shield against his fear. "We can't get close. How are you supposed to do what Tapu Koko couldn't?" Ash finally turned his gaze to Gladion. There was no arrogance in his eyes, only a quiet, unshakable certainty. "By not playing her game." He gave the brim of his cap a slight tug. "Pikachu, Phase 1. Let's get her attention." Pikachu needed no other command. It leaped from Ash's shoulder, a golden streak against the gray, ruined deck. It didn't charge forward. It began to run, a blur of motion, circling the perimeter of the main tower. It was impossibly fast, its movements fluid and precise, darting over rubble and leaping across chasms in the deck plating. The mother beast, which had been placidly observing the chaos, twitched. Its vacant eyes tried to follow the tiny, racing spark of energy. "What's he doing?" Olivia, the kahuna of Akala, asked, shielding her eyes. "He's creating a diversion, but not a conventional one," Kukui breathed, his scientific mind racing to catch up. "He's not building up a charge for a big attack. He's creating a constant, low-level energy signature. Annoying, but not threatening." A fly buzzing in her ear. A tentacle, thick as a tree trunk, lashed out toward Pikachu. But just as it was about to strike, Pikachu was already gone, its movements seemingly a fraction of a second ahead of the attack. It was a dance. A feint here, a burst of speed there. Another tentacle struck, then another. They were all missing, striking the deck and sending up showers of debris where Pikachu had been a moment before. The beast was getting frustrated. Its movements became larger, more erratic. "Now," Ash said, his voice low. From his belt, he unclipped another Pokeball. "Greninja, I need you." With a flash of red light, the ninja Pokemon appeared. It landed in a low crouch, its presence a stark contrast to the Alolan Pokemon, a cool, silent predator amidst the tropical vibrancy. It looked at Ash, a silent question in its crimson eyes. There was no need for words. Their bond transcended that. "Draw its fire to the east wing. Keep it occupied. Don't let it settle," Ash commanded. Greninja vanished. It didn't run, it was simply there one moment and gone the next, a flicker of shadow. A moment later, a volley of water shurikens, spinning discs of high-pressure water, slammed into the mother beast's far side. They didn't do any real damage, merely splattering against the gelatinous hide, but it was enough. The creature's attention snapped toward the new annoyance. While Greninja and Pikachu executed a perfectly synchronized ballet of distraction, pulling the beast's attention and attacks away from the center, Ash closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and the world around him seemed to quiet. The roar of the wind, the shriek of tortured metal, the alien hum of the wormhole, it all faded into a background hum. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his mind. With his very soul. He reached out with his aura. To the others, nothing had changed. But to the few who were sensitive enough, to Hala, who felt a sudden, profound calm wash over him, to Tapu Koko, stirring in the wreckage, its head lifting in surprise, the air around Ash shifted. It became dense, heavy with an unseen power, a silent blue flame that only the spirit could perceive. Gladion felt it as a prickling on his skin, a sudden pressure in the air that made the hairs on his arms stand up. He stared at Ash, who stood perfectly still in the eye of the storm he had created. He wasn't just a trainer. He was something else. Through his aura, Ash saw the world not as light and shape, but as a tapestry of life force. He saw the panicked, flickering sparks of the ether employees huddled in shelters. He saw the weary but resilient flames of the Kahuna's Pokemon. He saw the raging inferno of Gladion's anger and fear. And he saw the mother beast. It was a maelstrom of energy, a chaotic vortex of alien hunger and human terror. But at its heart, buried deep within the parasitic consciousness of the Nihilego, he found it, a tiny, trapped star of pure green light. It was flickering, screaming, fighting. It was Lusamine. "Help, me." The thought wasn't a word. It was a feeling, a raw broadcast of terror and agony that would have driven a normal person insane. Ash focused on that light, pouring his own calm, steady aura toward it like a lifeline. "I'm here," he projected back, a feeling of unwavering stability, of safety. "Hold on." The green light flared, recognizing the contact. For a split second, the mother beast froze. Its tentacles went limp. Pikachu and Greninja paused, their task complete, and instantly moved back toward Ash, flanking him like royal guards. The lull lasted only a second. The Nihilego consciousness, feeling the intrusion, reasserted its control with a vengeance. A wave of pure psychic malice erupted from the beast, not aimed at anyone, but at the entire island. It was an attack on the mind. Hala cried out and staggered, clutching his head. Kukui fell to one knee, his vision swimming. Gladion felt a spike of ice-cold dread pierce his heart, filled with visions of his mother dissolving into nothingness. But the wave broke against an invisible wall around Ash. He gritted his teeth, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. His own aura flared brighter, a shield of brilliant blue, pushing back against the tide of madness. He was protecting not just himself, but everyone on the central deck. "It knows I can reach her," Ash grunted, his eyes snapping open. They were glowing, faintly, with an inner blue light. "It's putting up a wall. I can't get through from a distance." He looked at the creature, then at the pulsating wormhole above it. "There's only one way." He began to walk forward, directly toward the monstrous fusion. "Ash, no!" Kukui yelled, shaking his head to clear it. "Those tentacles will drain you in a second." Ash didn't stop. "It won't attack me directly. It can't. It knows my aura is a threat to its control. It will try to keep me at a distance." As if on cue, the beast unleashed a barrage of crystalline venom spikes. They weren't aimed at Ash, but at the ground in front of him, creating a wall of toxic, sizzling craters. Ash didn't even slow down. He simply veered left, his path weaving through the incoming projectiles with an unnerving prescience. It wasn't just good reflexes, he was moving before the spikes were even fully formed, his aura giving him flashes of intent, a whisper of the future. He was 20 yards away. 10. The air grew thick, humming with extra-dimensional power. He could feel the Nihilego's hatred, its possessive, ravenous hunger. He could feel Lusamine's terror, a frantic, caged bird beating its wings against the bars of her own mind. A massive tentacle swept down, not to strike him, but to slam the deck and block his path. The entire platform shuddered. "Pikachu, Thunderbolt!" Ash commanded, his voice ringing with authority. Pikachu leaped into the air, its body arcing, and unleashed a torrent of golden lightning. It wasn't the wide-area blast Tapu Koko had used. It was a focused, piercing spear of energy. It struck the tentacle not at its thickest point, but at a joint Ash had identified, a nexus of energy he could perceive with his aura. The tentacle convulsed, momentarily paralyzed. It was the only opening he would get. Ash ran. He ran onto the twitching limb, using it as a ramp, his boots finding purchase on the slick, semi-corporeal surface. He was running up the monster itself. He was inside its energy field now. The psychic pressure was immense, a physical weight that threatened to crush his skull. Memories that weren't his flooded his mind, the cold, silent void of ultra-space, the hunger, the search for a host, the intoxicating feeling of merging with a mind so full of passion and obsession. He saw Lusamine's own memories, twisted and weaponized, her desperate love for her children, warped into a desire to possess and preserve them like treasures. He gritted his teeth, forcing it all out. "You are not her," he projected, his aura a blade of defiance. "She is not yours." He reached the bell. He could see her now, floating just feet away, her eyes closed, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. She was so close. The Nihilego made its final move. The remaining tentacles stopped their assault on the island and turned inward, a forest of shimmering limbs converging on Ash's position to crush the intruder. There was no more time for strategy. No more room to dodge. Ash held up his right hand. "Now, Pikachu." Pikachu, still on the deck below, unleashed its full power. But not at the beast. It fired a massive thunderbolt straight up, directly at Ash. For a horrifying second, Gladion thought he was watching a suicide. But the lightning didn't strike Ash. It converged on his outstretched palm, wrapping around his hand and arm, contained and controlled by his aura. He wasn't being electrocuted, he was wielding the storm. His body was a conduit, his aura the insulator. With his hand now sheathed in a roaring glove of pure lightning, Ash plunged his arm into the gelatinous body of the mother beast. The world dissolved into white noise. He wasn't touching flesh. He was touching a consciousness. His aura, amplified by Pikachu's electricity, became a key, unlocking the prison. He bypassed the Nihilego defenses and made direct contact with Lusamine's trapped spirit. He didn't pull. He didn't fight. He offered. He showed her an image, a feeling, a memory. He showed her a vision of Lily, smiling, safe on the deck of a ship. He showed her Gladion, fighting desperately for her, his face a mask of furious love. He projected the feeling of the Alolan sun on her skin, the taste of salt in the air, the sound of her children's laughter. He showed her everything the parasite had taken and twisted. He showed her home. It's real, he sent, his own energy a warm, grounding anchor in the psychic storm. Come back. For the first time, Lusamine's will and the Nihilego's will were in direct opposition. The parasite wanted to consume, Lusamine wanted to live. The composite being began to tear itself apart from the inside. A soundless scream echoed across the island. The mother beast convulsed violently. The alien light in its bell flickered and died, replaced by a blinding flash of pure white energy that erupted from the point of Ash's hand. The fusion broke. The Nihilego's form dissolved like smoke, its body disintegrating into motes of shimmering, toxic light that were sucked back toward the wormhole. The portal itself, its anchor gone, wavered violently and then snapped shut with a thunderclap that shook the heavens, leaving behind only the normal, brilliant blue sky of Alola. And Lusamine fell. Ash, his strength almost spent, caught her before she could hit the deck. He collapsed to one knee, cradling her unconscious form. The lightning glove was gone. His arm steamed, the sleeve of his jacket burned away, but his skin was unharmed. He was breathing heavily, the blue glow in his eyes fading back to their normal brown. Silence descended upon Ether Paradise. A profound, ringing silence, broken only by the groan of stressed metal and the distant cry of a wind gull. Kukui and the Kahuna stared, speechless. They had just witnessed a boy do what a living legend and their combined might could not. He hadn't just won a battle. He had performed an exorcism. Gladion was the first to move. He sprinted across the deck, his heart pounding with a desperate, painful hope. He skidded to a halt beside Ash, looking down at his mother. She was pale, her clothes torn, her face smudged with soot, but she was breathing. She was herself. She was free. He looked at Ash, who met his gaze with weary understanding. The anger was gone from Gladion's face, replaced by a complex, grudging respect and a dawning awe. You saved her. Before Ash could reply, a shadow fell over them. He looked up. Tapu Koko floated silently in the air above them. It was damaged, its shell cracked and sparking, but it was alive. It looked down not at Lusamine, but at Ash. For a long moment, the man and the deity held each other's gaze. Then, in a gesture that sent a shockwave of disbelief through every Alolan present, Tapu Koko lowered its head and closed its shell in a clear, undeniable bow of respect. A god was paying homage to a mortal. Then, as silently as it appeared, it turned and vanished in a streak of yellow light. Ash finally allowed himself a small, tired smile. He gently shifted Lusamine's weight, preparing to hand her over to her son. She's going to be okay. 2 days later, Ash stood by the railing of a guest balcony in the restored section of Ether Paradise. The Foundation's recovery was proceeding at a miraculous pace, thanks to its immense resources. Drones zipped through the air, welding beams and clearing debris, and teams of workers were already replacing the shattered glass of the conservatory. The scars were there, but they were being covered. He hadn't left. He couldn't. He had felt the lingering trace of the Nihilago's energy, a faint, toxic stain clinging to Lusamine's aura, even in her sleep. It was a psychic hook, and while the fish was gone, the line was still there, leading back into the abyssal depths of ultra-space. Something was on the other end of that line. Something that was now aware of them. The door to the balcony slid open. Ash turned. Lusamine stood there. She was the picture of her former self, dressed in a sharp, immaculately white business dress, her hair perfectly styled, her posture regal. But it was a fragile reconstruction. Her skin was still too pale, and there was a haunted, shadowed look deep in her eyes that no amount of makeup could conceal. She looked at him, her expression unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of cool authority. "Mr. Ketchum," she said, her voice crisp and formal. "Just Ash is fine," he replied, turning back to look at the sea. "How are you feeling, Lusamine?" She walked to the railing, standing a few feet from him. She didn't answer his question. Instead, she said, "The preliminary damage report estimates repairs will cost over 9 billion poke dollars. The Alolan government is launching a full inquiry. Several board members are calling for my resignation, citing mental incompetence." She delivered this information as if reading a stock market report. "They're wrong," Ash said simply. "You were under the influence of something not even the kahunas could handle. It wasn't your fault." "Fault is irrelevant," she countered, her voice sharp as glass. "Control is everything. I lost control. That is the only fact that matters." She turned her head, her green eyes fixing on him with unnerving intensity. "I have reviewed every security recording. I have read the witness statements from Professor Kukui, the kahunas, even my own son. I have analyzed the energy readings. What you did was not a Pokemon battle. It was an anomaly. An impossibility." She took a step closer. "Tapu Koko, a literal god of this land, bowed to you. The psychic backlash from the creature that incapacitated trained specialists did not touch you. You wielded your Pikachu's lightning like a tool. You walked through a hail of attacks you could not possibly have seen coming. You are not a normal trainer, Ash Ketchum. You are something else entirely." Ash remained quiet, letting her speak. He could feel the turmoil beneath her cold, analytical surface. The terror was still there, a frantic, shivering thing she was trying to cage with logic and control. "My connection to that thing has left a residue," she continued, her voice dropping slightly, the first crack in her composure. "I can feel it. A pull. A whisper in the back of my mind when I sleep. It's a beacon. Sooner or later, something else will follow its light. My enemies on the board sense this weakness, even if they don't understand it. They will use it to tear down everything I have built." She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the raw, desperate strategist beneath the proud president. "Your power, your aura, as the professor called it, is the only thing that could counter it. It acted as a shield. An insulator. It is the only variable in this equation that can guarantee my security, and the security of this foundation." She stood straight, her chin lifted, the mask of the unshakable leader locking back into place. Her next words were precise, deliberate, and utterly insane. "I cannot purchase your services, Mr. Ketchum. A contract employee can be dismissed. A hired bodyguard can be bought off. I require a bond that is permanent, legally binding, and absolute. One that weds your unique capabilities to the Ether Foundation, ensuring your presence and protection are non-negotiable." She held his gaze, her eyes like chips of green ice. "As payment for saving my life and, by extension, this foundation, I am invoking a right of salvage and service. I demand that you marry me." The sheer, audacious absurdity of the statement hung in the air between them. Ash stared at her, not in shock, but in a kind of weary disbelief. He could see it all now. It wasn't about love or gratitude. It was a power play born of absolute terror. She was trying to chain a force of nature to her front door to keep the real monsters at bay. He saw the fear in her eyes, the silent, screaming plea for safety hidden behind the outrageous demand. He saw a woman so traumatized she would rather shackle herself to a stranger than ever be vulnerable again. And in that moment, he felt not anger, but a profound sense of pity. He let out a slow breath, the sea breeze ruffling his hair. He looked away from her, out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. He thought about the whisper she'd mentioned, the psychic hook leading back into the darkness. He knew she was right. This was only the beginning. Finally, he turned back to her. His expression was calm, gentle, but his eyes held a core of unyielding steel. "Marriage is off the table," he said, his voice soft but firm, leaving no room for argument. "But I'm not leaving." He took a step closer, closing the distance between them, and his presence seemed to fill the space, a comforting weight against the crushing anxiety she carried. He looked directly into her eyes, past the facade, and spoke to the terrified woman within. "Tell me who you're really afraid of." Chapter 2, The Ethereum Compact. Lusamine's composure was a masterpiece of engineering, a structure built from years of boardroom battles and absolute self-control. But Ash's quiet, firm refusal was like a seismic shock, not powerful enough to demolish the structure, but strong enough to send hairline fractures racing through its foundation. For a flicker of a second, her mask of cool authority didn't just crack, it vanished. He saw a flash of raw, unfiltered panic in her eyes, the terror of a queen whose final, desperate gambit had been casually swept from the board. Then, just as quickly, the mask was back in place, reassembled with practiced speed. The panic was gone, replaced by a chillingly blank appraisal. She was recalculating, reassessing this impossible variable that refused to fit into any known equation. "I see," she said, her voice a clipped, precise staccato. The warmth of the setting sun seemed to stop a foot from her skin, repelled by the sheer coldness of her presence. "You misunderstand the nature of the transaction, Mr. Ketchum. This is not a negotiation." "I'm not for sale," Ash replied, his tone unchanging. It wasn't defiant or angry, it was a simple statement of fact, as immutable as the ocean beside them. "And you don't need a husband. You need an ally. You're trying to use a legal contract to cage a force of nature, but the things you're afraid of don't care about a Alolan marriage law." He gestured vaguely toward the darkening sky, toward the space between the stars where the wound had been. "Whatever is out there, it's not going to be scared off by a wedding ring." The truth of his words was so blunt, so utterly dismissive of the corporate and legal framework she used to control her world, that it left her momentarily speechless. She had built an empire on contracts, on acquisitions, and binding agreements. He was telling her that her most powerful tools were useless. "My presence here," she finally said, pivoting with the skill of a master politician, "is a liability. The board sees weakness. My children see a victim. The world sees a woman who lost her mind. Your continued presence, unexplained, will only fuel speculation and instability. It must be formalized. It must be contained within a structure I control." "Then give me a title," Ash suggested, shrugging. "Make me your official Pokemon battle consultant. Head of interdimensional security. Whatever you want. But it's a job, not a life sentence. I'm here to help, not to be owned." Lusamine's mind worked furiously. He had given her an out, a way to save face while still achieving her primary objective, keeping him close. It was a concession, but one made entirely on his terms. He held all the cards, and they both knew it. The feeling was utterly alien to her, and she despised it. "Very well," she conceded, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Effective immediately, you are appointed to the newly created position of Special Guardian to the President. You will have Level 10 clearance, access to all Foundation facilities, and your authority in matters of Ether Paradise security will be second only to my own." She looked him up and down, a flicker of distaste in her eyes as she took in his simple, travel-worn clothes. You will be assigned quarters in the executive wing. We will also provide you with a more appropriate wardrobe. I'm good with my own clothes, Ash said with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But the rest sounds fine. He was letting her have the small victory, the illusion of command. He didn't care about titles or quarters, he cared about the invisible thread of darkness he could feel spooled around her, leading into the void. Wick will arrange the details, Lusamine said, turning away, the conversation clearly over in her mind. She paused at the door, her back to him. Do not mistake this arrangement for friendship, Mr. Ketchum. You are a tool. A highly effective, unique tool, I will grant you. But a tool nonetheless. Your purpose is to ensure my stability and the integrity of this foundation. Fulfill that purpose, and you will be rewarded. Fail, and you will be discarded. She swept from the balcony without a backward glance, leaving him alone with the twilight. Ash watched her go, a quiet sigh escaping his lips. He heard the threat, but he also felt the fear driving it. It was the desperate posturing of someone who felt a cage closing around them. Pikachu murmured from his shoulder, its small voice full of concern. It had felt the chill coming off the ether president. Ash reached up and scratched his partner behind the ears. It's okay, buddy, he said softly. She's just scared. And scared people build walls. He looked out at the first stars beginning to appear in the purple sky. We just have to show her she doesn't need them. The next morning, Ash was met by Wick. The assistant branch chief of Ether Paradise was the complete antithesis of her boss, warm, effusive, and radiating a genuine kindness that was almost startling in the sterile, white-on-white environment of the executive wing. Ash. It's so wonderful to see you up and about, she said, her smile so broad it made her eyes crinkle at the corners. On behalf of the entire Ether Foundation, I want to express our deepest, most sincere gratitude. What you did, it was a miracle. The president is, well, she's the president, but I know she is grateful, too. In her own way. She has a funny way of showing it, Ash replied dryly, but he returned Wick's smile. Her warmth was a welcome relief. Her way is to create a new executive position overnight with a budget that made our finance department faint, Wick said with a conspiratorial whisper. Come, let me show you to your quarters. The president was very specific about the location. She led him down a corridor that was less a hallway and more a monument to minimalist architecture. The walls were seamless, glowing with soft, internal light. The floor was polished white stone that seemed to drink the sound of their footsteps. It felt like walking through the inside of a futuristic dream. The quarters she led him to were breathtaking. It was less a room and more a sprawling suite, with a floor-to-ceiling panoramic window that offered a stunning 180-degree view of the ocean. A sleek, modern kitchenette was built into one wall, and a door led off to what was presumably a bedroom. It was luxurious, impersonal, and felt as welcoming as a museum exhibit. The president's personal residence is the next suite over, Wick explained, gesturing down the hall. And Gladian's is on the other side. She wanted you clothes. Clothes enough to be a guard dog, Ash thought. He set his dusty backpack down on a low, white leather sofa. It looked absurdly out of place, a splash of lived-in reality in a sea of sterile perfection. I've also been instructed to give you a tour, Wick continued, her cheerful demeanor unwavering. To familiarize you with the facilities you now have access to. We can start with the conservation areas. That's the heart of our work, you know. Protecting Pokémon who have been hurt or threatened. The tour was an eye-opener. As Wick led him through the different habitats, artificial environments mimicking forests, deserts, and tundras with breathtaking fidelity, Ash saw the true face of the Ether Foundation, the one Lusamine had presented to the world. He saw researchers tending to a wounded Alola Ninetales, its fur singed and its eyes full of fear. He saw a team carefully nursing a Corsola colony, painstakingly regrowing branches that had been broken off by marauding Mariani. It was good work. It was noble work. It was a world away from the nightmare he had witnessed on the main deck. The President's passion for protecting Pokemon is genuine, Wick said softly, as they watched a veterinarian apply a salve to a Psyduck's chronic headache. She loves them. But her love, it became distorted. Possessive. The loss of her husband in an experiment with ultra wormholes, it broke something in her. She became obsessed with finding him, with controlling the uncontrollable. That obsession is what the Ultra Beast latched onto. She's still obsessed with control, Ash observed, thinking of their conversation on the balcony. It's all she has left, Wick said with a sad smile. She thinks if she can control everything around her, she can prevent anything bad from ever happening again. But you can't control the world, can you? No, Ash agreed. You can only be strong enough to face it when it goes wrong. As they were passing through the main lobby, a sharp voice cut through the air. Having a look around the castle, Ketchum. Gladion stood leaning against a pillar, arms crossed, Silvally at his side. The synthetic Pokemon regarded Ash with its intelligent, unsettling gaze, but it made no hostile move. Gladion's expression was a careful mask of neutrality, but his eyes were sharp, analytical. Wick's showing me the ropes, Ash replied easily. Don't let the pretty habitats fool you, Gladion said, his voice low. This place is built on secrets. My mother, she doesn't give people power. She buys them. Be careful she doesn't find your price. He already refused her first offer, Ash said, his gaze steady. Gladion's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. He glanced from Ash to Wick, who suddenly found the floor incredibly interesting. He understood immediately. The sheer audacity of his mother's proposition was exactly her style. The fact that this stranger had turned her down flat, it was unthinkable. It changed the entire dynamic. Humph, Gladion grunted, a sound that was almost a laugh. So you have a spine after all. Good. You'll need it. He pushed off the pillar. Just remember why you're here. You're not one of her pretty exhibits to be polished and put on a shelf. You're here to fix what she broke. Do that. Nothing more. He turned and strode away, Silvally falling into step beside him. He hadn't thanked Ash. He hadn't offered friendship. But he had offered a warning, and in Gladion's world, that was a profound sign of respect. The boardroom of the Ether Foundation was a circle of white in a world of white. A massive, round table made of a single piece of polished composite material dominated the room. The chairs were ergonomically molded and unforgiving. The only color came from the brilliant blue of the ocean visible through the armored glass of the window that made up one entire wall. It was a place for dissections, not discussions. Lusamine sat at the head of the table, her posture ramrod straight. She was the queen on her throne, but today, there were cracks in her royal facade. A faint tremor in her hand as she lifted a glass of water, a slight darkness under her eyes. The other board members, 6 of them, were seated around the table. They were sharks, and they could smell the blood in the water. At Lusamine's right, in the seat usually reserved for her chief legal counsel, sat Ash. He wore his usual jacket and jeans, a stark and deliberate contrast to the tailored suits and dresses of everyone else in the room. Pikachu was not with him. This wasn't a battle for Pokemon. He sat in quiet repose, his hands resting on the table, his gaze calm and observant as he took in the other members. The most vocal was a man with a sharp, pointed face and a self-important air that seemed to enter the room before he did. This was Faba. His official title was head of research, but his ambition was to occupy Lusamine's chair. Madam President, Faba began, his voice oozing a synthetic sympathy that set Ash's teeth on edge. We are all, of course, immensely relieved at your swift recovery. However, the preliminary reports on the incident are cause for significant concern among our investors and governmental partners. He gestured to a data pad in the center of the table. A holographic projection shimmered to life, showing damage estimates, stock value projections plummeting, and red-lettered warnings about potential legal action from the Alolan government. The financial fallout alone is catastrophic, Faba continued, steepling his fingers. But the crisis of confidence is the greater threat. The Foundation's image is one of stability, of safety. This incident suggests a profound lapse in leadership and judgment. Lusamine's jaw tightened. A lapse caused by an unprecedented extradimensional threat, Faba. A threat which, I might add, originated from research conducted by your department. It was a good counter, but it lacked her usual venom. Her voice was strained. Faba smiled, a predator's thin-lipped expression. An unforeseen complication of groundbreaking work. All pioneering science has its risks. The question is one of management. Of oversight. He looked around the table, addressing the other members. I believe it is our fiduciary duty to take decisive action to restore confidence. I propose the formation of a temporary executive oversight committee. This committee, which I would be willing to chair, would assist the President in her duties during her convalescence, ensuring that all decisions are made with the utmost stability and fiscal responsibility in mind. It was a bloodless coup, wrapped in the language of corporate governance. He wasn't trying to oust her, he was trying to render her powerless, to make her a figurehead while he seized control of the ship. One of the other members, a portly man from the finance division, nodded nervously. He has a point, Lusamine. Our partners in Kalos are threatening to pull funding. We need to show them we're taking this seriously. And sidelining our president is the way to do that. Wick interjected, her voice trembling slightly but firm. She was the only other person in the room entirely on Lusamine's side. She is the founder and visionary of this entire organization. A visionary who merged with a hostile alien and nearly destroyed her own life's work, Faba countered coolly. Sentiment cannot be allowed to jeopardize the Foundation itself. Lusamine's face was pale. The stress of the argument was wearing on her, her psychic defenses worn thin by her trauma. She looked cornered, the carefully constructed walls of her authority beginning to crumble under the assault. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. The memory of the fusion, the loss of control, it was all rushing back, paralyzing her. It was then that Ash spoke for the first time. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tense atmosphere like a finely honed blade, drawing every eye in the room. Faba, he said, his tone conversational, as if he were asking about the weather. Faba turned, an expression of annoyance on his face at being interrupted by this anomaly. Mr. Ketchum. This is a closed board meeting. Your presence is already highly irregular. Ash ignored him, his gaze level and unwavering. You were the head of research on Ultra Beasts, weren't you? I am the branch chief of the Ether Foundation's research division, yes, Faba corrected him haughtily. Right, Ash said, nodding slowly. So you were the one leading the cosmic experiments. The project to open ultra wormholes deliberately. A nervous silence fell over the room. This was not about finance anymore. This was about blame. It was a sanctioned project with the president's full approval, Faba said defensively. Of course, Ash agreed. But you were the one who designed the containment systems, correct? The energy cages, the protocols. You wrote the reports. And you were the one who assured the president that the containment field for the cosmic experiment was foolproof. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make an accusation. He simply laid out a series of facts. But the implication was devastating, and it landed in the center of the table like a grenade with the pin pulled. Faba's smug demeanor evaporated. He stared at Ash, his face paling. Ash hadn't accused him of causing the disaster, but he had just reminded everyone in the room that it was Faba's scientific arrogance and faulty engineering that had handed Lusamine the loaded weapon in the first place. The lapse in judgment was not just hers, the catastrophic failure of protocol was his. The energy readings from the subject Pokemon were unprecedented, Faba stammered, his argument collapsing. Ash just looked at him, his silence more damning than any accusation. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. The narrative had changed. This was no longer about Lusamine's instability, it was about Faba's incompetence. The coup was dead. Lusamine stared at Ash, a complex mixture of emotions swirling in her eyes, shock, fury that he had spoken for her, and a grudging, undeniable spark of admiration. He hadn't used his strange power. He hadn't made a threat. He had dismantled her enemy with a single, perfectly aimed question. The motion to form a committee is denied, Lusamine said, her voice returning, laced with its familiar steel. This meeting is adjourned. Later, in the quiet of her private office, Lusamine stood before the window, watching the endless blue. The adrenaline from the meeting had faded, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. Ash stood near the door, having followed her from the boardroom. That was a reckless gamble, she said, her voice tight. You had no place to speak in that meeting. It worked, Ash replied. You undermined my authority by speaking for me. Your authority was already gone, he countered, his voice gentle but firm. They were about to vote you into a gilded cage. I just reminded Faba that if you go down, you can drag him down with you. She turned from the window, her arms crossed, a defensive posture. And what is your price for this service, Mr. Ketchum? My gratitude. More resources. A promotion from guardian to something more official. She was trying to frame it as a transaction again, to regain some semblance of control. I don't want anything, he said, and the simple sincerity in his voice seemed to frustrate her more than anything else. I told you. I'm here to help. No one does anything for free, she snapped. What is your angle? What do you want from me? Ash met her frustrated, suspicious gaze. I want you to be okay, he said. That's it. Her breath hitched. The simple, unadorned honesty of it was a blow she had no defense for. For years, every interaction had been a calculation, every relationship a negotiation for power or influence. The concept of selfless help was so alien to her current world that she couldn't process it. Before she could formulate a reply, the door slid open and Wick entered, her face pale with worry. Madam President, I apologize for the interruption, but, we have a situation. Lusamine's spine stiffened. What is it? It's research post Gamma, on the southern islet, Wick said, her voice trembling. They went silent 20 minutes ago. Before we lost contact, the head researcher sent a single, panicked audio message. He said the stars were going out. A chill, colder than any boardroom politics, swept through Lusamine. She knew that feeling. The psychic stain on her soul throbbed in recognition. The whispers were getting louder. Night had fallen. The opulent suite felt less like a luxury and more like a prison. Lusamine had dismissed Wick, locking herself in her residence. She'd told Ash she needed to analyze the data from the silent research post, but he knew it was a lie. She was running, trying to outthink a problem that couldn't be solved with logic. Ash sat in his own suite, the lights off. He wasn't meditating, just sitting in the quiet dark, his senses extended. He had his own window to the world, his aura. He could feel the thrumming life of the Foundation around him, the sleeping Pokemon, the patrolling guards, the worried thoughts of Wick, the simmering resentment of Faba. And he could feel Lusamine. Her aura was a tangled knot of fear and pride, a flickering candle in a hurricane. Then, he felt it. It started as a subtle drop in the ambient energy of the island, a sudden cold spot in the tapestry of life. Then, a spike. A spike of pure, unadulterated terror, so sharp and powerful it felt like a physical blow. It was coming from Lusamine's room. He was on his feet before the conscious thought to move had even formed. He didn't knock. He placed his palm flat on the door, and a flicker of blue aura pulsed from his hand, overriding the electronic lock. The door slid open silently. The sight that greeted him was a scene from a waking nightmare. Lusamine's suite was plunged into an unnatural darkness that seemed to swallow the light. The temperature had dropped by 20 degrees, and his breath plumed in the air. Lusamine was backed into a corner of the room, her face a mask of primal fear. She wasn't screaming. She was beyond that. Her eyes were wide, fixed on something in the center of the room that Ash couldn't see with his normal vision. But his aura saw it clearly. Coalescing from the shadows was a vortex of non-light. It wasn't just dark, it was an absence, a hole in reality. From this hole, shimmering, semi-transparent tendrils of glistening shadow were unspooling. They moved with a slow, predatory grace, weaving through the air, soundlessly brushing against the furniture and leaving traces of frost where they passed. They were not attacking her. They were observing, tasting her fear, their movements filled with a cold, alien curiosity. At their tips, they fractured into shapes that hinted at crystalline claws and grasping, glassy fingers. This wasn't an attack. It was a visitation. In the back of Ash's mind, he heard it, a whisper, a chorus of voices speaking in a language made of colliding ice and dying stars. It was the presence from beyond the veil, the thing on the other end of the line, and it was no longer just whispering to Lusamine. It was knocking on the door. Lusamine let out a choked gasp as one of the tendrils drifted closer, its tip hovering inches from her face. She was paralyzed, trapped in the headlights of an oncoming cosmic horror. Ash didn't hesitate. He stepped into the room, and with a deep breath, he unleashed his power. He didn't shout or make a grand gesture. He simply opened the floodgates of his aura. A wave of brilliant, cobalt blue light erupted from him, a silent explosion of pure spiritual energy. It wasn't hot or cold, it was just pure. The unnatural darkness vaporized, and the suffocating pressure in the room vanished, replaced by a profound sense of calm and safety. The shadow tendrils recoiled as if struck by lightning. They hissed, a sound that was both a vibration in the air and a spike of agony in the mind, and retreated back into the swirling void from which they came. The void itself wavered, destabilized by the purity of Ash's aura, and then imploded, vanishing as if it had never been. The light from Ash's aura faded, plunging the room back into its normal, soft illumination. The temperature returned to normal. The only evidence of the intrusion was the look on Lusamine's face and the faint tracery of frost on her coffee table, which was already melting. Lusamine slid down the wall, her legs giving out, and she sat huddled on the floor, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking uncontrollably. Her mask of control wasn't just broken, it had been atomized. For the first time, Ash saw her not as a president, or a villain, or a strategist, but as a terrified woman who had just stared into the abyss. And the abyss had stared back. Ash walked over and knelt in front of her. He didn't touch her. He just waited. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. She had seen it. She had seen the blue light erupt from him. She had seen the shadows recoil from it. It was no longer a theory from a debriefing or a line in a report. She had seen, with her own eyes, that his power was real, and it was the only thing that had stood between her and that unspeakable horror. You saw them," she whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. "I saw them," Ash confirmed softly. What were they?" "A message," Ash said, his gaze distant, looking at the spot where the void had been. "From whatever you woke up when you opened that first wormhole. It knows you're here. And it's looking for the door." The last of her defenses crumbled. The fight went out of her, replaced by a wave of cold, desolate fear. She finally understood. This wasn't something she could outmaneuver or buy or control. She looked at Ash, her only shield in a war she hadn't known she was fighting. The power dynamic had been inverted, completely and irrevocably. He wasn't her tool. He was her only hope. "My private research lab," she said, her voice barely audible but firm with a newfound, desperate purpose. "It's 2 floors below my residence. Sublevel Alpha. It's off all official schematics. It has my complete, uncensored data on ultra space, my husband's original research, everything. No one has access but me." She met his eyes, her own shining with unshed tears. Now you do. Her offer of marriage had been a contract of control. This was a pact of survival. The Ethereum Compact had just been signed, not in ink, but in shared terror and the brilliant, cleansing light of a hero's soul. Chapter 3, The Trial of the Sun. The news of Ash's appointment as Lusamine's special guardian spread through ether paradise like a crackle of static electricity. It was an amorphous, undefined role, a title that dripped with implication and answered no questions. To the staff, he was an enigma, the quiet young man who had appeared from nowhere and performed a miracle. To the board, he was a threat, an unknown variable in Lusamine's hand that had upended their power play. To Faba, he was a target. But to Gladion, he was an intrusion. An insult. He found Ash 2 days later, not in some high-tech command center or a luxurious suite, but on one of the open-air training fields on the conservation level. The field was a simple expanse of packed earth, surrounded by the lush, artificial jungle of the habitat. Ash was alone, save for Pikachu. There were no flashy moves, no grand displays of power. He was simply moving, a series of fluid, controlled forms that were part martial art, part meditation. Pikachu mirrored him, its tiny body copying the sweeps of his arms and the shifting of his weight with perfect, synchronized grace. They weren't training for a battle, they were centering themselves. The flow of aura around them was a gentle, swirling current, calm and deep. It was a stark contrast to the storm of fury Gladion carried within him. Is this what a special guardian does? Gladion's voice was sharp, cutting through the tranquility. Practices dancing while the rest of us deal with the consequences of your new position. Ash finished his movement, letting his hands come to rest at his sides. He turned, his expression unruffled. It's called staying sharp. You should try it. Your anger makes you strong, but it also makes you predictable. The casual, accurate assessment of his fighting style was like a spark on dry tinder. Gladion's hands clenched into fists. Don't you dare lecture me. I've spent my entire life fighting my mother's madness from the inside. You show up, play the hero for a day, and now you're living in the executive wing, whispering in her ear. What did you do? What hold do you have over her? I don't have a hold over her, Ash said calmly. I'm trying to help her. By making yourself the center of attention. Gladion shot back, taking a step forward. His anger was a palpable force, a heat that radiated from him. Silvally, who had been waiting silently at the edge of the field, took a half-step forward as well, its head low, emitting a low, guttural growl. The rumors are tearing this place apart. That you're her new pet project. That you've bewitched her. Faba is using it to build a coalition against her, arguing that she's replaced one obsession with another. Your help is making everything worse. Ash met his furious gaze without flinching. So what do you suggest? I leave. Let Faba take over. Let whatever is whispering to your mother in the dark get what it wants. The mention of the whispers made Gladion flinch. He knew. His mother, in a rare moment of strained confidence after the boardroom incident, had admitted it to him. She had told him about the nightmares, the feeling of being watched. She had told him that Ash was the only thing that kept them at bay. It was a truth Gladion despised, because it made this outsider necessary. No, Gladion snarled, his frustration boiling over. I suggest you prove you're more than just some mystifying fluke. You want the Foundation to trust you. You want me to trust you. Then stop hiding behind my mother's title. Face me. A full battle. No tricks, no strange aura powers. Just you and your Pokemon against me and mine. In public. Let Alola see what you're really made of. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down with all the fury and pride of a wounded son. It was also, Ash realized, a brilliant political move, whether Gladion intended it to be or not. A public battle would quell the rumors. It would be a demonstration of strength, a show of force that would project stability. It would transform Ash from a shadowy enigma into a known quantity, a champion aligned with the Ether Foundation. It would give Lusamine's decision to appoint him a tangible, visible justification. Pikachu's ears flattened against its head, and a low growl rumbled in its throat. It was ready to fight right here, right now. Ash placed a hand on its head, calming it with a touch. He looked at Gladion, seeing past the anger to the desperate fear for his family underneath. He saw a young man trying to hold his world together with his bare hands. Hawali City, Ash said, his voice decisive. The public battle stage near the marina. 3 days from now. Full 6-on-6. We'll give them a show. Gladion's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the immediate, unconditional acceptance. He had expected an argument, a negotiation. A flicker of respect, grudging and unwelcome, sparked within him. Fine, he clipped out. Don't be late. He turned on his heel and strode away, silverly moving like his shadow. Ash watched him go, a thoughtful expression on his face. Pika? Pikachu asked, looking up at him. He's testing us, buddy, Ash murmured. But he's also giving us a stage. We'd better not disappoint him. The news of the exhibition match spread across Alola like wildfire. Gladion, the enigmatic and fearsome son of the Ether President, against the mysterious hero who had saved her. It was the talk of every island. The marina in Hawali City was packed, the crowd a vibrant, buzzing sea of people held back by Ether security. In the VIP stands, the Kahunas watched with keen interest alongside Professor Kukui. And in the center of the front row sat Lusamine. She was the picture of regal poise, dressed in a crisp white dress accented with gold. But her hands, resting in her lap, were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. This was more than a battle to her, it was the public unveiling of her new strategy. It was a declaration. This is my champion. This is my power. The success or failure of this gambit rested entirely on Ash's shoulders. She was staking her reputation on a man she barely knew, a force she didn't understand, and the feeling of ceding that much control was both terrifying and, to her own secret shock, thrilling. Gladion stood on his side of the field, the setting sun at his back. He looked every bit the Dark Knight, his expression grim and focused. The roar of the crowd was a distant hum. His world had narrowed to the trainer standing opposite him. Ash walked onto the field, and a hush fell over the stands. He looked calm. He wore his simple jacket, his familiar cap pulled low. He wasn't playing to the crowd, he wasn't posturing. He simply walked to his position, his presence a pool of quiet confidence in the center of the roaring arena. He gave Gladion a brief, respectful nod. The referee, an Ether official, raised his flags. This will be a full 6-on-6 battle between Gladion of the Ether Foundation and Ash of Pallet Town. The battle will be over when all 6 of one side's Pokémon are unable to continue. Now, trainers, send out your first Pokémon. The darkness is where true power is forged. Gladion roared, throwing his arm forward. Lycanroc, let's go. From the Pokeball emerged the midnight form of Lycanroc, a hunched, savage-looking creature with glowing red eyes. It let out a blood-curdling howl, its body tense with aggression. It was a statement of intent, this would be a brutal, merciless fight. Ash remained unfazed. He reached to his belt. A battle is about more than just power. Sceptile, I need you. The crowd gasped. The sleek, powerful grass type from the Hoenn region was a rare sight in Alola. Sceptile materialized in a flash, its posture relaxed but alert. The leaf blades on its arms were razor-sharp, and its yellow eyes were narrowed, already analyzing its opponent. It held a twig in its mouth, chewing on it with an air of supreme, almost arrogant, confidence. Battle begin. Stone Edge. Gladion commanded instantly. The ground around Sceptile erupted as pillars of sharpened rock shot from the earth, converging on its position. It was a powerful, overwhelming opening move. "Disappear," Ash said, his voice quiet. Sceptile vanished. It didn't dodge, it simply became a blur of green motion, moving at a speed that defied belief. The rock pillars slammed into each other, shattering into a cloud of dust where Sceptile had been a microsecond before. Sceptile reappeared behind Lycanroc, not even breathing hard. Gladion's eyes widened. The speed was incredible. "Behind you." Crunch. Lycanroc spun, its fangs bared, lunging for Sceptile. "Leaf Blade," Ash countered. Sceptile didn't move to meet the attack. It simply shifted its weight, pivoting on one foot. The blades on its arms flashed, glowing with green energy. It didn't strike Lycanroc's body. It struck its opponent's legs, a precise, targeted attack at the charging Pokémon's center of gravity. Lycanroc yelped as its legs were swept out from under it, its powerful crunch attack missing by a mile as it tumbled to the ground. "Now, Solar Beam." The crowd murmured in confusion. Solar Beam was a charging move, leaving a Pokémon vulnerable. Lycanroc was already scrambling back to its feet. But Sceptile didn't charge. It raised its head, and the seed on its back glowed. It gathered the last rays of the setting sun, and in less than 2 seconds, a feat that should have been impossible without a harsh sunlight weather effect, it fired a blinding beam of pure solar energy. The beam struck the recovering Lycanroc dead on, sending it flying across the field. It landed in a crumpled heap, swirls in its eyes. Lycanroc is unable to battle. Sceptile is the winner. A stunned silence fell over the arena, followed by an explosive roar. It had been less than a minute. Ash hadn't just won, he had dismantled Gladion's ferocious opener with breathtaking speed and precision. Gladion stared, his shock quickly hardening back into a grim frown. He recalled Lycanroc, his hand trembling slightly. That speed, that instant solar beam. Sceptile was a veteran, a master of its craft. Ash wasn't just a good trainer, he was a master. "You're full of surprises, Ketchum," Gladion growled. "But a glass cannon can be shattered. Go, Weevil." The sleek, dark ice-type appeared, its claws already flexing. It was faster than Lycanroc, a razor-sharp assassin. "Sceptile, return," Ash said, recalling his Pokémon. He'd won the opening exchange and gained the tactical advantage. He looked at the Weevil, then at Gladion's determined face. He needed to send a different kind of message now. "Greninja, I choose you." The crowd erupted again. The appearance of one rare, powerful Pokémon from another region was a treat. 2 was a declaration of intent. Greninja appeared in its characteristic low crouch, its tongue scarf wrapped around its face, its eyes narrowed. The air around it seemed to crackle with anticipation. Lusamine leaned forward in her seat, her knuckles bone white. The synergy she saw, it was flawless. Sceptile had been an instrument of precision. Greninja felt like something else entirely. It felt like a mirror of Ash himself. Weevil, Night Slash. Water Shuriken. The 2 blurs of motion met in the center of the field. Weevil's claws, glowing with dark energy, clashed against Greninja's spinning stars of pressurized water. It was a flurry of motion, too fast for most of the audience to follow, a chaotic dance of black and blue. "He's matching it!" Kukui exclaimed, gripping the railing. Weevil is one of the fastest Pokémon in existence, and Greninja is keeping up, blow for blow. The 2 combatants broke apart, landing on opposite sides of the field. Neither had landed a decisive hit. Gladion smirked. "Fast, but not fast enough." Ice Beam. A beam of cryogenic energy shot from Weevil's hands, freezing the ground as it traveled, racing toward Greninja. "Double team," Ash ordered. Greninja dissolved into a dozen identical copies, scattering across the field. The ice beam struck one, which vanished in a puff of smoke. But the beam continued, sweeping across the field, catching another, then another. Gladion was smart, using an area of effect attack to counter the illusion. Now, Aerial Ace! Gladion yelled, pointing at the last remaining copy. Aerial Ace was an attack that never missed. Weevil leaped into the air, its body cloaked in white energy, and shot toward the final Greninja like a missile. But as it was about to strike, Ash smiled. Got you. The Greninja it was targeting dissolved into water. It was a substitute. The real Greninja dropped from directly above, having used the confusion of the double team to leap high into the air, hiding in the glare of the stadium lights. It descended on the surprised Weevil, its body cloaked in a veil of rushing water. Aura Sphere. Wait. No. That wasn't right. Ash hadn't said that. He hadn't said anything. But in Lusamine's mind, clear as a bell, she had heard the name of the attack. And as the thought formed, Greninja's hands, already cupped, formed a swirling blue ball of energy. It wasn't a water-type move. It was something else. It looked like the aura Ash had used to save her. The sphere of energy slammed into Weevil's back, sending it crashing to the ground. It was a one-hit knockout. Weevil is unable to battle. Gladion was speechless. He recalled Weevil, staring at Greninja. Where had that attack come from? He hadn't heard Ash give a command. It was as if the Pokémon had acted on its own. Or, acted on a thought. He looked at Ash, who simply gave a slight nod. It was a confirmation. Their bond was so deep, so perfect, that they didn't need words. In the stands, Lusamine felt a shiver run down her spine. The connection she was witnessing, it was deeper than the forced, parasitic fusion she had experienced with Nihilego. This was a willing, symbiotic partnership. A bond of perfect trust and understanding. It was beautiful. And it was a power she could never hope to manufacture or control. The battle raged on. Gladion brought out his Crobat, using its speed and confusing attacks to try and gain an advantage. Ash countered with his Infernape, a whirlwind of fire and fury, whose close combat overwhelmed the bat Pokémon in a dazzling display of martial prowess. 3 of Gladion's Pokémon were down, and he had yet to defeat a single one of Ash's. The crowd was ecstatic, chanting Ash's name. He was putting on a masterclass. But he wasn't humiliating Gladion. Each victory was respectful, a demonstration of skill, not a show of dominance. Finally, Gladion was down to his last and most powerful partner. He held up the Pokeball, his expression now one of pure, focused determination. The anger was gone, burned away by the heat of the battle and replaced with a warrior's resolve. You are truly on another level, Ash Ketchum, he called out, his voice ringing with newfound respect. But this battle is not over. All my rage, all my strength, all my will to protect my family, it resides in this Pokémon. Silvally, it's our turn. The chimeric Pokémon appeared on the field, its cry a strange, synthetic roar. It shook its heavy head, its eyes fixed on Ash's side of the field. Ash had recalled Infernape and now only one Pokémon stood beside him, Pikachu. A Pikachu against a Silvally, a spectator murmured. This is a mismatch. But no one who had witnessed Ash's journey would ever make that mistake. Ash and Pikachu were not a trainer and a Pokémon. They were 2 halves of a single warrior. You fought well, Gladion, Ash called back, his own voice serious now, giving his opponent his full respect. Let's end this with everything we've got. Pikachu, let's go. Pikachu! Pikachu cried, leaping from the sidelines onto the field, its cheeks already sparking with immense power. Memory drive activated. Gladion yelled, tossing a disc to his partner. Silvally caught it in a slot on its head. Its body glowed, and its energy signature shifted, its type changing to ground. A perfect counter to an electric type. Multi-attack. Silvally's body was wreathed in earthy brown energy, and it charged, its claws extended. It was aiming to end this in a single, decisive blow. Pikachu, iron tail on the ground. Ash commanded. Pikachu's tail glowed with a metallic sheen. It spun and slammed its tail not on Silvally, but on the battlefield itself. The packed earth cracked and buckled under the force of the blow, sending a shower of dirt and small rocks into the air directly in Silvally's path. It was a brilliant defensive move, momentarily obscuring Silvally's vision and forcing it to slow. Now. Quick attack, get in close. Pikachu became a yellow blur, weaving through the dust cloud, moving inside Silvally's reach where its powerful charge was less effective. Crush Claw. Gladion yelled, adapting instantly. Silvally swiped at the blur with its massive claws, but Pikachu was too fast, too small, ducking and weaving under the attacks. Electroweb under its feet. Pikachu flipped backward, spitting out a net of crackling electricity. A ground type was immune to the damage, but not to the physical properties of the attack. The sticky web tangled around Silvally's legs, hampering its movement, sticking it to the ground. Now, Pikachu. Full power. Ash roared, his voice filled with passion for the first time in the battle. He threw his arm forward, his bond with Pikachu flaring to life, a visible link of aura connecting them. Volt Tackle. Pikachu became a comet of pure electrical energy, cloaked in a blinding golden aura, and shot across the field. This wasn't just an attack, it was the culmination of 1,000 battles, of a bond forged over years of shared adventure and struggle. Gladion's eyes widened in horror. That power, it was on par with a Z move, but it required no crystal, no dance. It was just, them. He had one last card to play. As the Volt Tackle was about to hit, he saw a flicker of something in Silvally's eyes. A flicker of its old rage, the instability of its creation. The energy of the impending attack was overloading its senses. It was about to go berserk. Just as the thought crossed Gladion's mind, Ash seemed to sense it too. In the split second before impact, Ash's eyes glowed with that now familiar blue light. A pulse of calm, dominant aura shot from him, not at Silvally, but into it. It wasn't an attack. It was a soothing balm, a wave of tranquility that washed over the Pokémon's raging spirit. The red glow in Silvally's eyes faded. The tension in its body eased. The berserk rage was quelled before it could even begin. And then the Volt Tackle hit. The explosion of light and sound was deafening. The entire stadium was bathed in gold. When the light faded, Silvally was on the ground, unconscious, its ground-type memory drive having been ejected from the sheer force of the blow. Pikachu stood over it, breathing heavily, sparks dancing harmlessly off its body, victorious. Silvally is unable to battle. The winner of the match is Ash Ketchum. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the stadium exploded. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a tidal wave of sound. They had just witnessed one of the greatest battles in modern Alolan history. Gladion recalled his partner, his shoulders slumped not in defeat, but in sheer, unadulterated awe. He looked across the field at Ash, who was already kneeling down, praising Pikachu. He hadn't just been beaten, he had been comprehensively outthought, outmaneuvered, and outfought. But more than that, in that final moment, Ash hadn't just gone for the win. He had protected Silvally from itself. He had calmed its rage. It was an act of mercy in the heat of a final, decisive blow. He walked across the field, his hand outstretched. Ash stood and took it, a firm, respectful grip. "I was wrong about you," Gladion said, his voice quiet but clear. "You're not an intrusion. You're what she needs." The admission cost him dearly, but it was the truth. In the stands, Lusamine stood up. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. It was the first real smile anyone had seen from her in years. The crowd, seeing her, began to cheer even louder. She had projected strength. She had won. Later that evening, the victory party was a loud, joyous affair. Ash, however, had slipped away, seeking quiet. He found himself on the same balcony where Lusamine had made her proposition. The door slid open, and he knew who it was without turning. Lusamine came to stand beside him. She was silent for a long time, just watching the moon reflect on the water. The pretense of the cold, calculating president was gone, at least for tonight. It was not just a battle, she finally said, her voice soft. It was artistry. The bond you have with your Pokémon, it's a thing of beauty. She had seen the utility of his power before. For the first time, she was seeing the grace in it. They're my best friends, Ash replied simply. My family. I tried to make a family out of preserved specimens in a collection, she mused, a deep sadness in her voice. I wanted to protect them from all harm, so I put them in cages. My Pokémon, my children. I thought my love was protecting them, but it was just another cage. She looked at him. You don't cage anything. You set them free. You make them stronger. You did that for my son today. He needed that defeat more than he ever needed a victory. It was the most vulnerable, honest thing he had ever heard her say. He felt the walls she kept around herself lowering, just a fraction. Wanting to meet her honesty with his own, he looked out at the ocean. I haven't always succeeded, he said, his voice quiet. There was a time, a friend. A legendary Pokémon named Latios. It sacrificed itself to save a city. I was there. I was right there, and I couldn't stop it. I wasn't strong enough. The memory was old, but the pain was still a faint, familiar ache in his aura. I promised myself then that I would get strong enough. Strong enough that I would never have to watch a friend die for me again. Lusamine listened, and in his story of failure, she found a connection far deeper than any display of power. He wasn't an infallible god or a perfect hero. He was a man, forged by loss, driven by a promise. Just like her. The difference was, his loss had driven him to protect others, while hers had driven her to control them. The distance between them, once a vast, cold ocean, had shrunk to a small, quiet space. The Ethereum Compact was no longer just about survival. A new clause, unspoken and unwritten, was being added. One of mutual respect. And perhaps, the first fragile seeds of trust. She found herself wanting to stand closer to him, to feel the calm, steady warmth of his aura that seemed to keep the encroaching darkness at bay. For the first time, her desire for him to stay had nothing to do with strategy, and everything to do with the man himself. Chapter 4, Whispers from the Void. The victory at Hawali City bought them time. It was a brilliant, public relations masterstroke that silenced the whispers of Lusamine's instability and replaced them with a buzz of excitement. The image of Ash's Pikachu standing victorious over the mighty Silvally was on every news feed in Alola. Ash Ketchum was no longer a mystery, he was a celebrity, the Ether Foundation's new star champion. Faba and his faction were forced into a sullen silence, their momentum shattered. For a few weeks, an illusion of normalcy settled over Ether Paradise. But it was only an illusion. The whispers didn't care about public opinion. The first sign that the truce was over came not with a bang, but with a dead, unnerving silence. It began in Wick's office, a space usually filled with the cheerful hum of data streams and video calls. Ash found her staring at a bank of monitors, her face pale, a deep frown creasing her brow. "What's wrong?" he asked, stepping into the room. Pikachu, on his shoulder, tilted its head, sensing her distress. "It's Research Outpost Epsilon," she said, pointing a trembling finger at a map of the Alolan archipelago displayed on the main screen. A small, isolated island to the southeast was flashing with a red error icon. "It's one of our most remote conservation areas. We use it to study nocturnal Pokémon in a pristine, light-free environment. They check in every 6 hours like clockwork. They missed their last 2 check-ins. Could be a solar flare, a communications malfunction," Ash suggested, though he felt a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He recognized the location. It was far from any major shipping lanes or flight paths. Isolated. Vulnerable. That's what I thought at first, Wick replied, typing furiously at her console. But it's not just communications. All of our remote biosensors have gone dead. Life signs, atmospheric readings, energy scanners, everything is flatlining. It's like the entire island just ceased to exist. And then there's this. She brought up an audio file. This was the last transmission we received, just before everything went dark. I don't understand it. She hit play. The audio was mostly static, a harsh, crackling sound like a failing signal. But underneath it, a man's voice could be heard, frantic and terrified. Not a storm, the light is, it's wrong, the Pokemon, they're all just staring up at the sky, oh gods, the sky, it's like a crown of glass and a cold, dark star. The voice dissolved into a strangled gasp, followed by a sound that made the blood run cold. It was a chorus of soft, melodic chimes, like a wind chime made of crystal, but the harmony was wrong, dissonant, and it seemed to scrape at the inside of the listener's skull. Then, silence. Ash felt it instantly. A phantom echo of the psychic pressure he had felt in Lusamine's suite. This was the same presence. The door to Wick's office slid open and Lusamine strode in. She had clearly been summoned. She wore a pristine white lab coat over her dress, her hair pulled back in a severe, practical style. Her face was a mask of cold professionalism, but Ash could see the tension in her jaw, the haunted look in her eyes. She had heard the recording. "Report," she commanded, her voice sharp, addressing Wick, but her eyes were fixed on Ash. "Total communications blackout from Epsilon Islet, Madam President," Wick summarized, her voice shaking slightly. "All sensors are offline." The last transmission was alarming. Lusamine's gaze shifted to the flashing red icon on the map. Her lips thinned into a hard line. "That energy signature," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The trace resonance left over in the static, it's the same as the Nihilego. Just, clearer. More refined." She knew. The psychic hook buried in her soul was vibrating in sympathy with this new event. She was the unwilling tuning fork for an orchestra from hell. "Faba is recommending we quarantine the island and send a drone fleet for reconnaissance," Lusamine continued, turning her full attention to Ash. The unspoken question hung in the air between them. A drone would see nothing. The threat wasn't physical, not yet. Only he could perceive its true nature. "A drone won't be enough," Ash said, confirming her thoughts. "Whatever is happening there, it's an attack on the mind, not the body. We have to go ourselves." Wick looked horrified. "Go there?" "Ash, Madam President, we don't know what we'd be walking into." "We know exactly what we're walking into," Lusamine corrected her, a grim finality in her tone. She looked at Ash, her expression a mixture of dread and resolve. The pact they had made in her darkened suite was being called due. "This is your purview, Special Guardian. Prepare a transport. We leave in 30 minutes. She turned and swept out of the room, leaving a stunned Wick in her wake. There was no hesitation in her command. In a strange way, the arrival of a tangible crisis seemed to have focused her. The boardroom predator and the terrified victim were gone, replaced by the brilliant, fearless scientist she had once been. This was a problem to be solved, an anomaly to be dissected, even if it might consume her. Ash gave Wick a reassuring nod. "Get her the fastest ship we have. And pack a medical kit. A heavy-duty one." He knew this wouldn't be a battle like the one with Gladion. This was a descent into a quiet, creeping horror. The flight to Epsilon Islet was tense and silent. They took a small, high-speed Ether Foundation interceptor, a sleek craft designed for rapid deployment. It was just the two of them, the pilot in a sealed cockpit up front, and Pikachu, a small, warm ball of reassuring energy on Ash's lap. Lusamine sat across from him, staring out the window at the endless expanse of the Pacific. She hadn't said a word since they'd boarded. She was reviewing data on her personal data pad, her face illuminated by its cool, blue light. She was trying to armor herself with information, to find a logical framework for the illogical horror they were approaching. As they drew closer, the feeling began. It was a subtle pressure at the temples, a low-frequency hum that seemed to vibrate in the bones. The bright Alolan sun still shone, but the light felt thin, brittle. "We're approaching the island's airspace," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "All my instruments are haywire. Navigational systems are offline. I'm flying on visual only." Ash looked out the window. The island emerged from the haze, a small, teardrop-shaped piece of land covered in dense, dark green jungle. From a distance, it looked perfectly normal. A paradise. But as they descended, the wrongness became apparent. There were no birds. The sky above the island was utterly empty. There were no sounds of cicadas or rustling wildlife from the jungle below. The entire island was wrapped in a profound, unnatural silence. The vibrant pulse of life that Ash could normally feel from any natural environment was gone, replaced by a dull, flat void. It felt like a beautifully rendered taxidermy exhibit. The interceptor touched down on a concrete landing pad near a collection of low, white research buildings. The silence was the first thing that hit them as the ramp lowered. It was absolute. Not peaceful, but suffocating. The air was still, heavy, and cold, despite the tropical heat. "Stay close," Ash said, his voice low. Pikachu leaped to his shoulder, its body tense, its nose twitching as it sniffed the dead air. Lusamine stepped off the ramp, her eyes sweeping the area. The facility looked pristine. A transport cart was parked neatly in its bay. The doors to the main lab were closed. There was no sign of a struggle, no damage. It was utterly, terrifyingly normal. "The main power grid is down," she observed, pointing to the dark status lights on an external generator. "But the emergency backup should have kicked in. It hasn't." They approached the main building. The door was unlocked. Ash pushed it open, every nerve ending screaming at him to turn back. The interior was just as undisturbed as the outside. Papers were stacked neatly on desks. A half-finished mug of coffee sat on a console, a thin film of mold on its surface. It was as if the staff had simply vanished into thin air. "Hello?" Lusamine called out, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. The word was swallowed by the room, leaving no echo. Then they saw them. In the central observation room, a large space with a panoramic window looking out into the jungle, the entire research staff, 8 people, were present. They weren't dead. They weren't hurt. They were just, standing there. Some were by the window, some were by their consoles, frozen in place like statues. Their faces were slack, their eyes open and unfocused, milky and dull. They were all staring in the same direction, up, at a point in the empty sky beyond the glass. What happened to them?" Lusamine whispered, her scientific mind rebelling against the sight. There were no physical symptoms, no signs of trauma. They were simply, empty. Ash closed his eyes, extending his aura. He didn't try to read their minds, he suspected there was nothing left to read. Instead, he felt the psychic residue in the room, the echoes of what had transpired. He saw it in flashes. A normal evening shift. Then, a strange light in the sky. Not a bright light, but a shimmering, crystalline distortion. The chimes from the recording started, a beautiful, haunting melody that drew their attention. They went to the window to look. The melody deepened, its alien harmonies bypassing their ears and resonating directly with their minds. It wasn't a sound, it was a psychic virus. It promised peace. It promised knowledge. It promised an end to all struggle. And one by one, it had simply scooped their consciousnesses out, like seeds from a fruit. What was left was an empty shell. "They're gone," Ash said, his voice grim. He opened his eyes. "They're mines. Something harvested them." He looked at the direction they were all staring. It used the sky as a focal point. A crown of glass, the researcher called it. A psychic lens. A cold dread washed over Lusamine. She backed away from the catatonic researchers, a hand flying to her mouth. This was what the whispers promised her. A serene, perfect emptiness. This was the peace of the void. Suddenly, from the jungle outside, came a sound. It was a low growl. But like the silence, it was wrong. It was hollow, devoid of any real emotion. Ash and Lusamine spun toward the window. The Pokémon of the island were beginning to emerge from the treeline. A hulking beware, a pack of Salandit, a flock of toucanon. They all moved with a strange, listless gait. Their eyes, like the researchers, were milky and vacant. They were puppets, their bodies animated by some unseen force. They began to surround the research building, not with aggression, but with a slow, deliberate purpose, penning them in. "It knows we're here," Lusamine stated, her voice tight with fear. "It's using the island's Pokémon as a perimeter guard." "It's testing us," Ash corrected her. "Seeing what we'll do. It's curious." He unclipped a Pokeball from his belt. "We need to find the source. The focal point of the psychic energy on this island." "The central communications array," Lusamine said immediately, her mind snapping back into analytical mode. "It's on the highest point of the island, a small hill to the north. It has its own dedicated power source. If something wanted to broadcast a powerful psychic signal, it would hijack that dish." "Then that's where we're going," Ash said. He glanced at the listless Pokémon gathering outside. "And it looks like we'll have to fight our way through them." He looked at Lusamine. "Stay behind me. Don't engage them unless you have to. They're not themselves. We don't want to hurt them." They slipped out a back door, moving quickly and quietly into the oppressive twilight of the jungle. The air was thick and humid, and the silence was even more profound under the canopy of leaves. They could hear the shuffling footsteps of the controlled Pokémon all around them, a cordon of empty vessels tightening around them. As they navigated a narrow game trail, a shape dropped from the trees in front of them. It was a Lurantis, its scythe-like arms held low. Its eyes were the same milky white as the others. It let out a soft, chittering sound, the hollow echo of its usual cry. "Lurantis, stop!" Ash commanded, holding up a hand. "We're not your enemy." The Pokémon didn't react. It simply raised its arms, which began to glow with the telltale green energy of a solar blade attack. "It can't hear you!" Lusamine cried. "Pikachu, Electroweb!" Pikachu fired a net of electricity that wrapped around the Lurantis. The Pokémon struggled, but it didn't seem to feel the pain of the electricity. It just fought against the physical restraint. "It's no good," Ash grunted, as they hurried past the ensnared Pokémon. "They're just puppets. We can't reason with them." They pushed on, the communications tower visible now through a break in the trees, a white spire against the darkening sky. But the path was blocked. A Snorlax, one of the largest Ash had ever seen, was lying on the path, fast asleep. Or at least, it appeared to be. Its eyes were closed, but its chest wasn't rising and falling with the rhythm of sleep. It was just, inert. "We can't go around it," Lusamine said, her voice a frantic whisper. "The jungle is too thick on either side." "We have to wake it up," Ash said. He took a deep breath. "But I don't think a poke flute is going to work." He was about to send out a Pokémon when a new sound cut through the air. It was the dissonant, chiming melody from the recording, clearer now, closer. It seemed to come from all around them. Ash's head swam. The psychic pressure was immense. He saw flashes of cold, distant stars and vast, empty nebulae. It was a siren song, promising rest, promising an end to struggle. He gritted his teeth, his own aura flaring to life as a defensive shield, pushing the influence away. He looked over at Lusamine. She was on her knees, her hands pressed to her temples, her face a mask of agony. The psychic hook in her soul made her exponentially more vulnerable. The whispers were screaming at her. "Lusamine," he yelled, rushing to her side. Suddenly, a new sound joined the cacophony. A high-pitched, guttural shriek. A shape blurred from the undergrowth. It was something Ash had never seen before. It looked like a hound, but its body was made of a shimmering, crystalline substance that seemed to shift and ripple, phasing in and out of focus. Its head was a geometric nightmare of sharp angles, and its eyes were glowing fissures of cold, purple light. It wasn't a Pokémon. It was an Ultra Beast. A new one. An enforcer. It ignored the Snorlax completely. It ignored Lusamine. Its target was Ash. The source of the disruptive aura. It lunged, its crystalline claws extended, its body becoming momentarily intangible as it passed through a tree trunk. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. A bolt of lightning shot from Pikachu's cheeks, but it passed straight through the creature's semi-corporeal form, doing no damage. The beast solidified just as it reached Ash, its claws slashing for his throat. Ash threw himself backward, tumbling over a root, the claws missing his face by inches. He felt a searing cold where they had passed. This thing was an assassin, designed to neutralize threats like him. Its body, it's not entirely in our dimension. Lusamine gasped, forcing herself to her feet, her scientific curiosity momentarily overpowering her pain. That's why physical attacks won't work. Then we need to find something that will. Ash yelled back, scrambling to his feet. He could track it with his aura, a moving cold spot in the world, but he couldn't touch it. The crystalline hound circled him, its movements fluid and silent. It was toying with him. Lusamine's mind was racing. Not in our dimension. A phased state. What could disrupt a phased energy state? A high-frequency vibration? A specific energy wavelength? Her mind flew back to her husband's old research, to theoretical papers on extradimensional physics she hadn't looked at in years. A frequency, she shouted, an idea sparking in her mind. It's vulnerable to a specific resonant frequency. My data pad, it can emit a sonic pulse. I just need to find the right one. She fumbled with the device, her fingers flying across the screen, bringing up a diagnostic tool she hadn't used since her days as a hands-on researcher. She began cycling through sonic frequencies, from deep infrasound to piercing ultrasound. The hound creature seemed to sense the new threat. It abandoned Ash and lunged toward Lusamine. "Oh no, you don't!" Ash roared. He couldn't hurt it, but he could get in its way. He threw himself in front of Lusamine, creating a living shield. The creature, unable to phase through his dense aura, slammed into him with the force of a freight train. The impact sent Ash flying, and he landed hard, his head cracking against a rock. The world exploded into stars, and his vision swam. Pika Pi. Pikachu shrieked, firing a desperate volley of electro balls that passed harmlessly through the beast. The hound turned back to Lusamine, its glowing eyes fixed on the datapad. She was frantically scrolling through the frequencies. Almost there, the beast lunged. "Got it," she screamed, slamming her thumb down on the screen. A high-pitched, barely audible sine wave emanated from the datapad. It had no effect on Ash or Lusamine. But the crystalline hound shrieked in agony, a sound of scraping glass and tearing metal. Its body flickered violently, its phased state destabilized. For a split second, it became fully solid, fully real. It was all the opening Pikachu needed. "Now, buddy!" Ash roared from the ground, his vision clearing. "Volt tackle!" With a cry of pure fury, Pikachu became a golden thunderbolt. It struck the now solid creature in the center of its mass. The impact was immense. The crystalline body, unable to handle the kinetic force and the massive electrical charge simultaneously, didn't just break. It shattered. It exploded into a million tiny shards of dark crystal, which dissolved into nothingness before they even hit the ground. Silence returned to the jungle, broken only by the sound of Lusamine's ragged breathing and the high-pitched whine from her datapad, which she quickly shut off. Ash pushed himself up, his head throbbing. He had a nasty gash on his temple, and blood was trickling down the side of his face. He looked at Lusamine, who was staring at the spot where the beast had been, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and triumph. They had done it. They had relied on each other, a perfect fusion of his power and her intellect. The forced proximity, the shared terror, and the desperate, life-or-death battle had forged a new, powerful bond between them. They were trapped, hunted, and exhausted, in the heart of a silent, alien-occupied island. In the dim light of the jungle, her face pale and smudged with dirt, her hair falling from its severe styling, she looked at him. The brilliant scientist, the ruthless president, the terrified woman, all of it was there. And in her eyes, he saw a raw, unguarded vulnerability that took his breath away. "The Snorlax," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's still blocking the path." Ash looked at the massive, inert Pokémon, then back at her. A slow smile spread across his bruised face. "I've got an idea. But you're going to have to trust me." He walked over to the Snorlax and placed both of his hands on its massive, furry side. He closed his eyes, his own blood dripping onto its fur. He took a deep breath, ignoring the pounding in his head, and reached out with his aura. He didn't try to control the Snorlax. He didn't try to wake it. He connected with the small, trapped spark of its true consciousness, buried deep within the psychic fog. And to that spark, he projected a single, powerful feeling, a memory drawn from his own mind and amplified 1,000 times. The feeling of finding a field of ripe, delicious berries after a long, hungry journey. The pure, unadulterated joy of food. The Snorlax's nose twitched. Its mouth opened in a massive, silent yawn. Its eyes fluttered open, and they were clear. For a moment, its own powerful life force had overwhelmed the alien influence. It looked around, confused, saw Ash and Lusamine, and then its gaze fell on the datapad still clutched in her hand. It looked vaguely like a cookie. With a happy rumble, the Snorlax sat up and reached for it. "Move!" Ash yelled, grabbing Lusamine's hand and pulling her with him. They scrambled up the path as the Snorlax, now fully awake and very hungry, lumbered after its perceived snack, clearing the way to the communications tower. They stumbled into the clearing at the base of the tower, their hearts pounding. The chiming was louder here, a constant, maddening thrum. The huge satellite dish at the top of the tower was pointed straight up, and it was glowing with a faint, sickly purple light. It was the source. Lusamine looked at Ash, her fear giving way to a fierce, desperate resolve. "I can sever the power feed from the control hub at the base. But it will likely have its own internal power source. You'll have to destroy the dish itself." "Got it," Ash said, nodding. His head throbbed, but his focus was absolute. The forced intimacy of the moment, huddled together in the dark at the foot of the enemy's weapon, was overwhelming. The pretense was gone. The contracts, the titles, the politics, all of it had been burned away by the horrors of the night. All that was left were two people, leaning on each other against the encroaching dark. She reached out, her hand hesitating for a moment before her fingers gently brushed against the gash on his temple. Her touch was surprisingly soft. "You're hurt." "I'll live," he said, his voice quiet. He didn't pull away. "I know," she replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Her eyes searched his, full of a terrifying, newfound emotion. "My proposal, on the balcony, it was a transaction. A demand born of fear." She took a shaky breath. "But now, my desire for you to stay, it's for entirely different reasons." He was her shield, her guardian, the only anchor in a world that was coming undone. And in the face of the silent, waiting abyss, she finally admitted, if only to herself, that he was becoming something more. Before Ash could respond, the ground began to shake, and the dissonant chiming reached a fever pitch. The entity knew they were at its heart. It was done testing them. It was done being curious. The whispers from the void were about to become a scream. Chapter 5, The Argentum Wardens. The world dissolved into a cacophony of sound and pressure. The dissonant chiming from the satellite dish intensified, no longer just a noise in the air but a physical force that vibrated through the soil, the trees, and their very bones. The ground beneath their feet shook, not from a tremor, but as if the island itself was groaning in agony. The sickly purple light atop the communications tower pulsed in time with the maddening rhythm, a malevolent beacon in the oppressive twilight. "It knows we're here." Lusamine yelled over the din, her hands pressed against her ears. "It's amplifying the signal." Ash gritted his teeth, the psychic pressure a physical weight trying to crush his skull. He could feel the entity's focus, a cold, vast intelligence turning its full attention upon them. The whispers were no longer just whispers, they were a torrent of alien thought, a psychic storm that threatened to shred his sanity. Images flooded his mind, galaxies dying, stars being consumed like motes of dust, entire realities collapsing into a silent, crystalline lattice. It was a vision of cosmic entropy, and it was beautiful and terrifying. He forced it back, his own aura flaring like a bonfire, a shield of warmth and life against the encroaching cold. The gash on his temple throbbed, but the pain was a grounding sensation, a reminder of his physical form. He looked at Lusamine. She was pale, trembling, fighting a far more intimate battle as the psychic hook in her soul resonated with the broadcast. But she was not breaking. Her eyes burned with a defiant, scientific fury. "The control hub is in the base of the tower," she shouted, pointing toward a reinforced steel door. "If I can get in, I can overload the primary power conduits." "It won't be enough." Ash countered, his gaze fixed on the glowing dish. "It has its own power. I have to destroy the source." "Then do it," she cried, a desperate plea and a fierce command all in one. Their plan was desperate, a two-pronged assault born of necessity. As Lusamine sprinted for the control hub, fumbling with a master keycard, Ash turned his attention to the tower. It was a 100-foot spire of steel and ceramic, and the target was at the very top. "Pikachu, you're with me." Ash yelled. "Charizard, I need you." He threw the pokeball, and with a flash of red light, his mighty Charizard appeared, its roar a defiant challenge to the alien chimes. The sheer, vibrant life force of the fire type was an anchor of reality in the corrupted landscape. "Get me to the top," Ash commanded, leaping onto Charizard's back. "Fast." Charizard needed no further instruction. With a powerful downbeat of its massive wings, it launched them into the air, a streak of orange flame against the purple-tinged sky. The ascent was terrifying. The psychic pressure intensified with every foot they climbed, and the air itself seemed to resist them, thick and viscous. Ash felt the entity's malice directed at him, a focused wave of psychic force designed to disorient and terrify. He saw a vision of himself falling, of Charizard's wings turning to dust. He growled, pushing it away with a surge of aura. "Not real." "Flamethrower," he roared. "Burn it all away." Charizard unleashed a torrent of brilliant orange fire, not at the dish, but in a wide arc around them. The searing heat, the raw, primal energy of the attack, seemed to tear through the psychic illusions, creating a temporary pocket of clear air. They reached the top. Ash leaped from Charizard's back, landing with practiced ease on the narrow maintenance platform that ringed the satellite dish. The metal was vibrating violently, and the purple light emanating from the dish was almost blinding. The chiming was a deafening, skull-splitting shriek. At this proximity, Ash could see that the light wasn't just a glow, swirling within it were complex, impossible geometric shapes, folding and unfolding in on themselves. It was a window, a pinhole aperture into the madness of ultra space. Below, Lusamine had managed to wrench the hub door open and disappeared inside. A moment later, the lights on the tower flickered, and the purple glow dimmed by a fraction. She was fighting back. Ash knew he had only one chance. He couldn't destroy the dish with a conventional attack, it was too reinforced. He had to disrupt the entity itself. "Pikachu, get ready," he yelled, planting his feet firmly. "We're going to pour everything we have into one shot." He held out his hand, palm up. Pikachu, understanding instantly, leaped onto his outstretched arm, its small body tense. Ash closed his eyes, drawing on his deepest reserves. He wasn't just calling on his own aura, he was reaching out, connecting to the vibrant life force of Charizard hovering nearby, to the fading sparks of the Pokémon on the island below, to the distant, steady flame of Lusamine fighting in the dark. He gathered it all, every scrap of life and will, and channeled it into a single point. His hand, and the Pikachu standing upon it, began to glow with a blinding, golden-white light. It was the color of the dawn, a pure, incandescent power that was the absolute antithesis of the cold, dark void. Giga. Volt, Ash began, his voice straining with the effort of containing so much energy. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos. It was a sleek, high-tech thrum, the sound of advanced engines, and it was coming from above. Ash's eyes snapped open. Descending from the clouds, moving with impossible speed and silence, was a fleet of aircraft unlike anything he had ever seen. They were not from the Ether Foundation. They were matte black, with sharp, angular designs that seemed to absorb the light. They bore no insignia, no flags. They were ghosts, slipping through the upper atmosphere completely undetected until this very moment. A hatch opened on the belly of the lead craft, and a figure dropped from it, landing on the very top of the satellite dish with a silent, magnetized click of their boots. The figure was clad head to toe in silver-gray armored plating, their face concealed by a mirrored visor that reflected the pulsating purple light. The armor was sleek, advanced, and bristling with technology. In their hands, they held a strange, rifle-like device. The figure completely ignored Ash. They raised their weapon and fired a single, concentrated beam of brilliant turquoise energy into the heart of the purple vortex. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The turquoise energy acted like a powerful solvent, dissolving the alien geometry. The purple light imploded with a deafening whump, and the chiming shriek cut off so abruptly that the resulting silence was a physical blow. The psychic pressure vanished. The tower stopped shaking. The battle was over. But a new, far more dangerous one was just beginning. The figure on the dish lowered their weapon and turned their helmeted head toward Ash. A cold, synthesized voice emanated from a speaker on their helmet. Paradivine threat neutralized. Subject Ash Ketchum, you are in violation of the Argenta mandate. Power down your anomalous energy signature and stand down. Failure to comply will be met with lethal force. Down below, the door to the control hub burst open. Lusamine emerged, her face smudged with grease from a blown conduit. She looked up, saw the silent, black aircraft hovering like birds of prey, saw the armored figure standing over a defeated Ash, and her blood ran cold. From the other aircraft, more figures began to rappel down on stealth lines, landing silently around the base of the tower. Within seconds, she was surrounded by a dozen of these silver-clad soldiers, all armed with the same advanced energy rifles, all moving with terrifying, disciplined precision. They formed a perfect perimeter, their weapons not pointed at her, but ready. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking with adrenaline and confusion. "Who are you?" A new figure emerged from the lead ship, descending not on a rope but on a controlled grav lift that deposited him soundlessly on the ground before her. He was not wearing a helmet. He was a man in his late 50s, with close-cropped silver hair, a face carved from granite, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore a high-collared, silver-gray uniform that bore a single, stylized insignia on the shoulder, a sword piercing a crown. He radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. "Madam President Lusamine, he said, his voice a calm, resonant baritone. It was not a question. I am Commander Valerius of the Argentum Wardens. And per the authority granted by the Ingress Protocol, I am placing you and this entire island under our jurisdiction. Lusamine stared at him, her mind racing. Argentum Wardens. Ingress Protocol. These were not terms she recognized from any international treaty or corporate agreement. This was something else. Something secret. Jurisdiction, she repeated, her voice regaining its sharp edge. I am the president of the Ether Foundation, a sovereign entity in a lowland territory. You have no authority here. Valerius offered a thin, humorless smile. Your corporate sovereignty ends where global security begins. For the past 2 months, our deep space sensors have been tracking a significant extradimensional energy surge originating from this sector. A surge that began the day you, Madam President, merged with a Class 4 Ultra Beast. This event, he gestured to the now silent tower, is the second major incursion linked directly to your unique metaphysical signature. You are not a victim of these events. You are the gateway. Every word was a hammer blow, a cold, logical conclusion that mirrored her own deepest fears. Our mandate is simple, Valerius continued, his gaze unwavering. We identify, isolate, and neutralize paradivine threats before they can escalate to a world-ending crisis. The entity you have been communing with, the one we have designated, the Umbral Sovereign, is a Class 9 threat. Our predictive models indicate a 94% probability that its next incursion, using you as its anchor, will be irreversible. He took a step closer, his voice dropping slightly but losing none of its steel. Therefore, the only logical, strategically sound solution is to eliminate the gateway. Permanently. The threat was unmistakable, delivered with the cold, dispassionate certainty of a surgeon discussing an amputation. They were here to kill her. Before Lusamine could even process the full horror of his words, a roar of fury erupted from the sky. Charizard, seeing its trainer threatened by the armored figure on the dish, unleashed a massive flamethrower. The warden on the dish didn't even flinch. A shimmering, hexagonal energy shield materialized around them, deflecting the full force of the blast. The warden raised their rifle again, this time aiming at Charizard. No! Ash yelled. He dismissed the golden energy he had been gathering, the strain immense. He stood, putting himself between the warden and his Pokémon. Charizard, stand down. The warden paused, their weapon trained on Ash. Subject is powering down, the synthesized voice reported. Hold your fire, warden, Commander Valerius ordered calmly, his gaze never leaving Lusamine. He then looked up at Ash. Your friend is wise to listen. Our technology is specifically designed to counter energy forms like his Pokémon. It would not be a fair fight. He turned his attention back to Lusamine, his expression hardening. Your guardian is an interesting complication. His aura output is off the charts, a phenomenon we have only seen in historical texts. He is a walking paradivine event. But he is still just one man. And he is protecting a liability this world can no longer afford. A squad of wardens approached Lusamine, their movements synchronized. They did not raise their weapons to her, but their intent was clear. Suddenly, a blur of motion shot past them. Gladden. He had followed them, tracking their ship, and had just arrived, his Silvally at his side. He skidded to a halt between the wardens and his mother, his face a mask of pure rage. Get away from her, he snarled, unclipping a memory drive. Valerius simply raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. The type, full chassis. An interesting attempt to replicate a divine power set. Futile, but interesting. He made a small, precise hand gesture. 2 of his wardens moved. They didn't engage Silvally. One of them fired a device at the ground at Gladion's feet. It wasn't a weapon, it was a small disc that instantly projected a shimmering wall of turquoise energy around him and Silvally, trapping them in a containment field. Gladion slammed his fist against it, but the field held firm, absorbing the kinetic energy without a ripple. "Do not mistake our restraint for weakness, boy," Valerius said coolly. "We are not here to fight Pokemon battles. We are here to conduct an execution." The raw, brutal honesty of it sent a chill down Lusamine's spine. These were not villains in the traditional sense. They were not driven by greed or madness. They were soldiers, surgeons, following a logical, ruthless calculus to its ultimate conclusion. In their own minds, they were the heroes, saving the world from a threat it didn't even know existed. And she was the disease they had come to cure. Up on the tower, Ash watched, his mind racing. He was surrounded, outmatched technologically, and his every move was being scrutinized. He could fight. He and Pikachu and Charizard could probably take out the warden on the dish. But what about the dozen on the ground? What about Valerius and his unknown capabilities? A full-blown battle would be a chaotic, bloody affair, and in the chaos, a single warden could get a clear shot at Lusamine. He couldn't risk it. He had to de-escalate. He had to show them he was not a threat, but a negotiator. "Commander Valerius." Ash called down, his voice clear and commanding, amplified by a subtle application of aura so that it carried over the hum of the aircraft. "You're right. She is a gateway. But you're wrong about the solution." Valerius looked up, a flicker of genuine surprise in his cold eyes. He hadn't expected the anomaly to attempt diplomacy. "Killing the gateway won't stop what's on the other side," Ash continued, his voice resonating with an authority that had nothing to do with rank or title. It was the authority of someone who had stood on the precipice of oblivion and looked into the abyss. "It will just make it angrier. It will find another way through. A Messier way. You won't just be killing her, you'll be ringing the dinner bell." He began to walk slowly along the narrow platform, his hands held out in a clear, non-threatening gesture. "I can protect her. My aura can disrupt its influence, shield her from it. We can work to sever the connection permanently. But we need time. Killing her is the easy, stupid option. Keeping her alive is the hard, smart one." Valerius listened, his expression unreadable. He was a man who dealt in probabilities and strategic certainties. Ash was presenting a variable he had not fully accounted for, a living, breathing containment field. "Your confidence is noted, Subject Ketchum," Valerius replied, his tone laced with skepticism. "But your abilities are unquantified, your loyalty is to a compromised individual, and your presence complicates our mission. We operate on certainties, not hopes." "Then let me give you a certainty," Ash said, stopping directly above the commander. He let a small, controlled flicker of his aura flare to life, a brief, brilliant pulse of blue light that was visible even in the daylight. The warden on the dish instinctively took a step back, raising their rifle. The wardens on the ground tensed. The air crackled with power. It wasn't an attack. It was a demonstration. A statement. "You saw what happened to that creature," Ash said, his voice dropping, now laced with a quiet, terrifying intensity. "That was a taste of what I can do. I am the only thing on this planet that can fight the Sovereign on its own terms. You need me. And if you want my help, you will stand down. You will not touch her. You will not touch her son." He held the commander's gaze, a mortal man giving an ultimatum to a godslayer. "This is your one and only offer, Commander," Ash finished, the blue light of his aura fading, leaving an afterimage burned into everyone's vision. "Work with us. Or go through me." A tense, profound silence fell over the clearing. The Argentum Wardens, a force capable of neutralizing gods, were being held at bay by the sheer, indomitable will of a single man. Commander Valerius stared up at Ash, the strategist in him warring with the soldier. He had come here for a simple, clean termination. He had found himself in a standoff with a power that defied all his metrics, a power that was now offering him a deal with the devil to fight a greater demon. His entire world of black and white certainties had just been plunged into a deep, complicated shade of gray. Chapter 6, the Guardian's gambit. The silence on Epsilon Islet was a tangible thing, a held breath stretched to its breaking point. Commander Valerius stood like a statue carved from iron, his wintry eyes locked on the young man standing 100 feet above him. Ash's ultimatum hung in the air, audacious and absolute. It was not a plea for mercy, it was a declaration of terms. For a long, agonizing minute, no one moved. The Argentum wardens remained in their perfect, disciplined stances, their energy rifles humming with contained power, awaiting a single word from their commander. Glad Ion, trapped in his turquoise prison, watched with a mixture of disbelief and frantic hope. Lusamine, surrounded but untouched, found she wasn't breathing. She was watching a battle of wills, a confrontation more intense and more critical than any Pokémon fight. Ash had wagered everything, their lives, their freedom, on the sheer force of his own presence. Finally, Valerius gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice calm and level, carrying to every warden on the island. The armored figure on the dish lowered their rifle. The squad surrounding Lusamine relaxed their posture by a fraction, a subtle but significant shift from imminent threat to observation. The turquoise energy field encasing Glad Ion silverly dissolved into nothingness. Valerius had not agreed to Ash's terms. He had merely paused the execution. This was a tactical retreat, not a surrender. "Your demonstration is compelling, Subject Ketchum," Valerius called up, his voice retaining its cold, analytical edge. "But words are meaningless. We require data. Proof of concept." He gestured to Lusamine. "You claim your aura can shield her. We will put that hypothesis to the test." He raised a hand to the communicator on his collar. "Warden Prime, deploy the Psylocus." A shiver of dread, cold and sharp, went through Lusamine. It was a name that sounded both scientific and profane. From the belly of the lead aircraft, a device was lowered. It was a sphere of polished black obsidian, about the size of a bowling ball, etched with silver circuitry that pulsed with a faint, internal light. It floated down on its own gravlift and came to a stop, hovering 3 feet off the ground in the center of the clearing. "The Psylocus is a sensory device," Valerius explained, his eyes fixed on Lusamine. "It is designed to attract and amplify residual psychic energy. When we first arrived, it registered a significant parasitic signature clinging to you, Madam President. A clear link to the Umbral Sovereign." He then looked up at Ash. "Now, Mr. Ketchum. Do as you claim. Shield her. Show me you can suppress that signature. If you can reduce the locus reading to below the designated threshold for a sustained period, I will reconsider my primary objective." It was a test. A cold, clinical, pass-fail examination with Lusamine's life as the grade. Ash understood immediately. He rappelled down from the tower with Charizard's help, landing lightly on the ground. He recalled his faithful fire type, then walked toward Lusamine, his gaze never leaving Valerius. He stopped in front of her, turning his back to the commander and his soldiers, a deliberate act of trust and defiance. He was facing her now, his presence a warm, solid shield. "It's all right," he murmured, seeing the fear in her eyes. "Just focus on me." He reached out, not touching her, but letting his aura flow from him, a gentle, shimmering river of blue energy. It wrapped around her, not like a cage, but like a warm blanket, insulating her from the world, from the whispers, from the cold judgment of the wardens. "Begin," Valerius commanded. The Psylocus began to hum, its silver circuits glowing brighter. A low, thrumming sound filled the air, and Lusamine gasped. She felt it instantly, a horrible, pulling sensation, as if an invisible hook was tugging at her very soul, trying to draw out the toxic stain left by the Nihilego. The whispers in her mind, which had been silent since the tower was disabled, returned with a vengeance, amplified by the device. Her knees buckled. The world began to spin. But then, Ash's aura intensified. The blue light around her grew stronger, warmer. The pulling sensation lessened. The whispers faded, pushed back by a wave of profound calm and unwavering strength. She looked up at Ash. He had his eyes closed, his brow furrowed in concentration. A faint sheen of sweat was on his brow. For him, this was a battle, a silent war of will against the locust and the darkness it was trying to summon. Valerius watched a holographic display projected from his wrist gauntlet. A series of complex graphs and numbers shifted and changed. A primary indicator, a bar graph labeled parasitic signature, was fluctuating wildly. At first, it had spiked into the red. Now, under the influence of Ash's aura, it was dropping. Slowly, agonizingly, it descended from red to orange, then to yellow. "It's working," a warden technician reported over the comms, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Hostile signature levels are dropping. He's actively suppressing it." The bar graph hovered just above the green threshold line, fighting to stay down against the constant pull of the locust. Ash gritted his teeth, pouring more energy into the shield. He wasn't just blocking the signal, he was actively cleansing the residue from Lusamine's spirit, a process as delicate and dangerous as performing psychic surgery. "Impressive," Valerius murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He allowed the test to continue for a full 2 minutes. The indicator held steady, just above the green. Ash was holding his ground. He had proven his point. "Deactivate the locus," Valerius ordered. The device powered down, its hum fading. The pulling sensation vanished. Ash let out a long, slow breath, the blue light around him receding. He swayed on his feet, the effort having taken a significant toll. Lusamine instinctively reached out, her hand finding his arm to steady him. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, a spark of shared warmth and connection in the cold, clinical atmosphere. "Your ability is confirmed, Mr. Ketchum," Valerius announced, approaching them. "You can indeed suppress the signature. But suppression is not elimination. You have bought Madam President a reprieve, not a pardon. I will grant you your time." He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. "You have one standard Alolan rotation, 1 month. In that time, you will work to sever her connection to the Sovereign. My wardens will establish a perimeter around this archipelago. We will monitor you. Every energy reading, every transmission. You will, for all intents and purposes, be living in a gilded cage. At the end of that month, I will return, and I will take another reading. If the parasitic signature is gone, our mission here is concluded. If it is not," he left the threat hanging, its implication absolute. "We will proceed with the original solution." It was a draconian, impossible deadline, but it was better than immediate execution. "What about my staff?" Lusamine demanded, finding her voice. "The people on this island? They will be taken into our custody for medical evaluation and debriefing," Valerius replied. "Their memories of this event, and of our existence, will be redacted. For their own safety, and for ours. As far as the world will know, Research Outpost Epsilon suffered a catastrophic systems failure and was decommissioned." He was erasing them, rewriting reality with the casual authority of a god. Before Lusamine could protest this violation, Valerius turned to leave. "Commander," Ash said, his voice quiet but firm. Valerius paused. "We're going to need resources. Information. Everything you have on this Umbral Sovereign." Valerius considered this for a moment. "A reasonable request. I will authorize a one-time data transfer to your Foundation secure servers. What you do with that information is up to you." He gave Lusamine a final, cold look. 1 month, Madam President. Make it count." With that, he and his soldiers moved with silent efficiency. The catatonic. Researchers were levitated onto the ships. The Psylocus was retrieved. Within 10 minutes, the Argentum wardens were gone, vanishing back into the clouds as silently as they had arrived, leaving behind only the eerie quiet of the depopulated island and the weight of their impossible ultimatum. The flight back to Ether Paradise was a whirlwind of frantic energy. Lusamine, her mind galvanized by the deadline, was a storm of commands and calculations. She was on a secure comms link with Wick, issuing orders, quarantining the transferred data from the wardens, and initiating a dozen secret research protocols. The fear was still there, a cold stone in her gut, but it was now fuel for the brilliant, strategic mind that had built an empire. Ash, meanwhile, was quiet, staring out the window. His head throbbed, and he felt a deep, chilling exhaustion. He had faced down a godslayer and won a reprieve, but the game had changed. They were no longer just fighting a monster in the dark, they were in a race against a cold, logical human enemy who saw them as an acceptable loss for the greater good. Gladion was silent, brooding. He had been rendered utterly powerless, a pawn in a game far beyond his comprehension. His rage had been useless against the Warden's technology. He was now looking at Ash with a new, complex expression. It was no longer just respect, it was the look of a warrior who realizes he needs a new teacher. They landed at Ether Paradise to a state of controlled chaos. Wick met them on the landing pad, her face a mask of worry. The data package from the Wardens has been received, she reported to Lusamine. It's immense. And heavily encrypted. It will take days, maybe weeks, to fully decrypt. Then start now, Lusamine snapped. I want our best cryptographers on it around the clock. Divert all non-essential resources. This is now the Foundation's sole priority. She swept past Wick and then paused, turning to Ash and Gladion. My private lab. Now. Both of you. The lab, sub-level Alpha, was Lusamine's sanctum sanctorum. It was a stark contrast to the rest of the Foundation. It was messy, chaotic, and vibrantly alive. Chalkboards were covered in complex equations, holographic models of alien biology drifted in the air, and stacks of physical books were piled on every available surface. This was not the office of a president, it was the workshop of a genius. Lusamine went straight to a central holographic interface. The Wardens are a strategic threat. The Sovereign is an existential one. We can't fight a war on two fronts. We need to outmaneuver them. Her fingers flew across the console, pulling up star charts, energy readings, and topographical maps of Alola. The Wardens have us in a cage. They'll be watching every move we make from Ether Paradise. We'll be under a microscope. Any attempt to build a weapon or a device powerful enough to sever my connection will be seen as a threat and they'll shut us down. So we need a new base of operations, Gladion surmised, catching on quickly. Somewhere they can't watch us. Exactly, Lusamine said. Somewhere their sensors can't penetrate. A place with a high degree of natural, chaotic energy that will mask our own work. Her eyes scanned the map of Alola, and then they stopped. A slow, predatory smile touched her lips. A place like Vast Pony Canyon. Ash's eyebrows shot up. Vast Pony Canyon was one of the most wild and spiritually potent places in all of Alola, a place where the veil between their world and others was naturally thin. It was home to ancient trials and powerful dragon-type Pokémon. It was the perfect hiding spot. We can't just move my entire lab there, Lusamine continued. It would be too obvious. We need a diversion. Something big enough to draw the Warden's primary attention, to make them focus their resources on one location while we work in another. She looked at Ash, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous, brilliant light. We need to make them think we are planning a public surrender. We will orchestrate a meeting, a transfer of power. We'll leak it through channels we know they're monitoring. We'll make them believe I am giving up, handing myself over to them under the supervision of the Alolan Kahunas to ensure fairness. It's a trap, Ash said, seeing the pieces fall into place. You lure their command structure, Valerius included, into one place, a place of our choosing, Gladion finished, his own eyes lighting up with understanding. And while they're focused on the fake surrender, we're miles away, working. It's more than just a feint, Lusamine said, her voice dropping, filled with a new, thrilling intensity. While you and I are in the canyon, Glad Ion, you will be the face of the operation. You will be the one they see, the one managing the surrender. And you will lead them not to a peaceful meeting, but to a tactical nightmare. You will be my sword. She then turned to Ash. And you will be my shield. The only one who can keep me stable while I perform the work necessary to free myself. This was Lusamine in her element. Not the terrified victim or the cold executive, but a master strategist, a brilliant general planning a daring campaign. She was magnificent. The wardens are smart, and Valerius is smarter, Ash cautioned. He won't fall for a simple trick. That's where you come in, Lusamine said, turning back to the console. She pulled up schematics, not of a weapon, but of a person, the Warden Prime, the armored soldier from the top of the tower. Their technology is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. They rely on their energy shields, their grav lifts, their advanced sensors. We need to neutralize that advantage. She pointed to a power reading on the schematic. Their armor runs on a compact, high-density power source. But my husband's research, he theorized about certain energy frequencies that could create a cascading resonance failure in such systems. A way to shut them down, not with brute force, but with a precise, surgical strike. And you think you can build a device that can do that? Gladion asked, impressed. I don't need to, Lusamine said, a sly grin on her face. She looked at Ash, then gestured to Pikachu, who was watching from a nearby table. I don't need to build a device. I just need to give our living generator the right frequency to aim for. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and brilliant. It was a high-stakes chess game played across the entire Alolan archipelago, using misdirection, public perception, and their own unique abilities as weapons. Forced into this desperate collaboration, the three of them, the mother, the son, and the guardian, were no longer a fractured, dysfunctional family. They were a conspiracy. A war council. In a quiet moment, as Glad Ion was studying the maps of Pony Canyon, Lusamine approached Ash. The manic, brilliant energy had subsided, replaced by a quiet, intense focus. This will be dangerous, she said, her voice low. Especially for you. You will be the linchpin of the entire operation. I know, he replied simply. She hesitated, then took a step closer. The professional distance she usually maintained had evaporated. What I said on the island. I meant it. My reasons for wanting you to stay, they are no longer strategic. She looked down, a rare flicker of uncertainty on her face. When your aura was around me, when you were shielding me from the locust, it was the first time I felt truly safe in years. The first time the whispers were completely gone. She looked up, her green eyes searching his. It wasn't just a shield. It felt warm. It felt like peace. Before Ash could respond, she seemed to catch herself, the moment of vulnerability passing. She cleared her throat, stepping back. We have work to do. The clock is ticking. But the moment had happened. The unspoken had been given a voice. The contract was long forgotten, replaced by a bond forged in shared terror, mutual respect, and now, a dawning, terrifying intimacy. They were partners, in every sense of the word, standing together against the coming storm. The Guardian's gambit was in motion. Chapter 7, Into the Umbral Abyss. The month granted by Commander Valerius was a blur of frantic, clandestine activity. On the surface, the Ether Foundation projected an aura of wounded but recovering stability. Lusamine made a few carefully managed public appearances, looking pale but composed, a leader bravely carrying on. The official story was that the Epsilon Islet incident was a tragic but contained industrial accident. The world, for the most part, accepted it. But beneath the surface, a secret war was being waged. Glad Ion, stepping into his role with a grim determination that impressed even his mother, became the master of the feint. He leaked information through compromised channels, planting whispers of Lusamine's deteriorating mental state and her intention to surrender to a neutral third party for humanitarian evaluation. He held tense, secretive meetings with the island kahunas, playing the part of a desperate son trying to save his mother from a shadowy international cabal. Hala and Olivia, sensing a deeper game at play and trusting the hero who had fought alongside them, agreed to preside over the surrender at Vast Pony Canyon, unknowingly becoming key players in the gambit. Meanwhile, in the hidden depths of Sublevel Alpha, and later in a makeshift, lead-lined laboratory hastily assembled in a deep cave within Pony Canyon, the real work was being done. Lusamine was a force of nature, a whirlwind of intellectual fury. Fueled by caffeine and a terrifying proximity to her own mortality, she worked day and night, deciphering the Warden's data package. It was a treasure trove of horrifying truths. The Umbral Sovereign was not a single entity but a Gestalt consciousness, a hive mind of crystalline beings native to a dimension of pure thought and energy. It didn't conquer universes, it consumed them, absorbing their knowledge and life force, leaving behind nothing but cold, silent, crystalline structures. The Nihilego were its scouts, its probes. Lusamine's ambition and her experiments into ultra-space had been like a flare lit in an ocean of darkness, drawing its attention. She was its first and most promising foothold in their reality. While she worked, Ash became her anchor. The Sovereign, aware of their efforts, escalated its attacks. The psychic whispers became a constant, gnawing pressure. Lusamine would be struck by sudden, debilitating migraines, her vision filled with impossible geometry, her mind flooded with the Sovereign's serene, terrifying promises of peace through oblivion. In those moments, Ash would act. He would envelop her in his aura, a warm, blue sanctuary that drove the darkness back. The process was exhausting for him and intensely intimate for both of them. He would sit with her for hours, his energy a constant, protective presence while she slept, ensuring her dreams were her own. In these long, quiet hours, the walls between them crumbled completely. She saw the immense, quiet strength he possessed, the profound kindness that underpinned his power. He saw the brilliant, passionate woman behind the trauma and the arrogance, the scientist who had reached for the stars and had gotten horribly burned. The unspoken feelings between them grew, a fragile, beautiful thing taking root in the heart of a secret war. On the final day of the 30th day, the gambit was sprung. Commander Valerius, his suspicions lulled by a month of apparent inactivity and the corroborating reports of Lusamine's impending surrender, took the bait. A squadron of Argentum Warden ships, including his flagship, the Certainty, descended upon Vast Pony Canyon. They established a wide, technologically enforced perimeter, their sensors focused on the meeting point where Glad Ion and the Kahunas were waiting. They were walking into a trap, and they were blind to it. The real flashpoint was happening miles away, deep inside the canyon's cave system. The makeshift lab was lit by the glow of a dozen monitors and the swirling holographic model of Lusamine's own brain chemistry. "It's ready," she announced, her voice hoarse with exhaustion but ringing with triumph. She held up a device. It wasn't a weapon, but a complex-looking headset, interwoven with silver filaments and a series of crystalline focusing lenses. The Severance Protocol. Based on my husband's theoretical work and the Warden's data, this device should allow me to generate a psychic frequency precisely inverse to the Sovereign's connection. It won't attack it, it will nullify it. Like noise-canceling headphones for the soul. But to do that, she continued, her expression turning grim, I have to open the connection fully one last time. I have to see it, to face it, to get a lock on its core frequency. And I have to do it while it's actively trying to consume me. Ash stepped forward. I'll be with you. I won't let it take you. She gave him a small, tired smile. I know. She put on the headset. As her fingers hovered over the activation switch, every alarm in the lab began to scream. Red lights flashed, and a massive, chaotic energy signature appeared on the main monitor. What is that? Ash asked, spinning toward the screen. It's not me, Lusamine said, her eyes wide with horror. It's them. The Wardens. Their ship's energy cores, the canyon's ambient energy is interfering with their shielding. The power fluctuations, oh, you've got to be kidding me. The truth dawned on her with sickening clarity. The sovereign isn't just anchored to me. It's a creature of energy. It can be drawn to any massive, unstable power source. Our trap for the wardens: we've inadvertently created a massive, all-you-can-eat buffet for the sovereign. Before their eyes, the sky outside the cave mouth ripped open. It wasn't the small, surgical tear from before. This was a ragged, gaping maw of swirling purple and black, a wound in the very fabric of reality. The umbral sovereign was no longer knocking. It was kicking down the door. And its target wasn't just Lusamine anymore. It was the warden fleet. A colossal, crystalline tentacle, miles long, erupted from the wormhole. It bypassed the cave and smashed directly into one of the warden ships. The ship's advanced energy shields, already flickering from the canyon's interference, shattered like glass. The tentacle wrapped around the vessel and, with a sickening crunch of metal, crushed it as if it were a tin can. The sovereign wasn't just trying to get in. It was actively attacking the only other power source in the area that could challenge it. Then, the second phase of its plan began. The ground shook violently, and a beam of pure, gravitational force shot down from the wormhole. It wasn't an attack. It was a tractor beam. It locked onto their cave, onto ether paradise miles away, onto the very ground beneath Lusamine's feet. The sovereign was trying to physically pull her, and a chunk of Alola with her, into its domain. The rocks around them groaned. The lab equipment began to slide across the floor. "It's pulling us in." Lusamine screamed, holding onto a console to stay upright. "If we go through that wormhole, we're lost." Ash's mind raced. There was no other choice. They couldn't fight it from here. They couldn't run. They had to take the fight to the source. "No," he said, his voice a bedrock of calm in the chaos. "We're not lost. We're going in after it. We have to sever the connection from the other side." Lusamine stared at him, aghast. "Go in there? That's suicide." "It's our only chance," he countered. He looked at the headset in her hand. "That device is our only weapon. We have to get it to the heart of the beast." He turned to Glad Ion, who was standing white-faced but resolute, his Silvally at his side. "Glad Ion, your job just changed. You're not a diversion anymore. You're our rear guard. Keep the path home open, no matter what." Glad Ion nodded, his expression grim. "I understand." Ash looked at Lusamine, his eyes full of a fierce, unwavering belief. "Trust me." She looked from his determined face to the horrifying vortex in the sky. All her logic, all her scientific reasoning screamed that this was madness. But the man in front of her was a walking impossibility, a defiance of all logic. And he had not failed her yet. "All right," she breathed, her decision made. "Let's go hunt a god." She activated the headset. As they, along with Glad Ion, Silvally, and a handful of their most powerful Pokémon, were lifted from the ground and pulled into the swirling abyss, Ash sent out one final, desperate call with his aura. It was a plea, a broadcast to the only other powers in Alola who might be able to help. He called to the Tapu Guardians. The other side was not a place. It was a violation of physics. They landed on a floating, crystalline island in a sea of silent, stardusted blackness. There was no up or down, only a vague sense of gravity that held them to the jagged, translucent surface. In the sky above, vast, geometric structures drifted like continents, pulsing with a cold, internal light. The air, if it could be called that, did not carry sound, yet a constant, low hum vibrated through their bodies, a baseline thrum of pure, alien thought. "Incredible," Lusamine whispered, her scientific curiosity momentarily eclipsing her fear. "It's a dimension of crystallized thought forms. The structures, they're not built. They're concepts, given form." Her headset was already working, a faint blue light pulsing around her temples as it analyzed the environment, trying to find the source frequency of the sovereign. Ash felt the immense psychic pressure, but his aura held it at bay, creating a small island of sanity around their group. Pikachu was on his shoulder, a tense ball of electric energy, its senses overwhelmed. Greninja and Sceptile stood back to back, their veteran instincts on high alert. They didn't have to wait long for the welcome party. From the crystalline structures around them, figures began to coalesce. They were the hound-like assassins from Epsilon Islet, but these were larger, more defined, their forms sharp and deadly. They were the Sovereign's antibodies, its royal guard, and they moved with a silent, synchronized purpose. "They're here to stop us." Gladion yelled, his Silvally letting out a challenging roar. Multi-attack. Silvally, cloaked in energy, charged forward, but the hounds were faster, more agile in this environment. They phased through its attacks, their claws leaving trails of cold fire in the non-air. "We can't fight them all," Ash shouted. He could see, in the distance, a larger, more complex structure, a lattice of black crystal that pulsed with a brighter, more intense purple light. It was the heart of the Sovereign's local consciousness. The Nexus. "Lusamine, how do we get there?" Lusamine, her eyes closed, was focused on the headset. "The pathways, they aren't physical. They're logical. Conjectural. I can see them with the device. It's like a maze. Follow me." She took off at a run, not on a clear path, but leaping from one floating shard of crystal to another, her movements guided by the information feeding into her brain. She wasn't a damsel in distress, her intellect was their map in this impossible world. Ash and Gladion followed, their Pokémon providing cover. Sceptile's leaf blade, infused with Ash's aura, could now strike the hounds as they phased. Greninja's water shurikens, guided by their telepathic bond, anticipated the hounds' movements, forcing them to solidify. It was a desperate, running battle through a landscape stolen from a nightmare. They reached a vast, open plaza of black crystal, the Nexus towering before them. It looked like a cathedral built by a mad god, all impossible angles and pulsing, dark light. And standing before it, waiting for them, was a new horror. It was a perfect, crystalline copy of Lusamine. It stood serenely, dressed not in her usual white, but in a flowing gown of black, solidified shadow. Its blonde hair was made of shimmering glass filaments, and its eyes were hollow sockets of purple fire. It was the Sovereign's avatar, a mockery of her form. "You have come so far," the avatar's voice echoed directly in their minds, a sound of perfect, melodic poison. "You seek knowledge. You seek perfection. I can give you that. Why struggle in your flawed, chaotic world of flesh and decay?" It gestured, and the air around them shimmered. An image appeared, a vision of a perfected ether paradise, pristine and eternal. She saw her children, Lily and Gladion, smiling, safe, their forms preserved forever in flawless, unaging crystal. She saw her husband, not dead, but returned, his form a perfect, godlike being of light. It was everything she had ever wanted, every obsessive dream made manifest. It was a paradise without pain, without loss, without death. It was a beautiful, perfect lie. "Mother, don't listen to it." Gladion screamed, sensing the temptation. Lusamine was trembling. The avatar was showing her her own heart's desire, purified of all consequence. It was a powerful, seductive poison. For a moment, her resolve wavered. Ash stepped up beside her, his presence a warm, grounding force. He didn't shout. He didn't lecture. He simply reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm, real. His grip was firm, solid. "It's not real, Lusamine," he said, his voice quiet in the psychic torrent. "Life isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. The struggle, the loss, that's part of it. That's what makes the good moments matter." He squeezed her hand. "That paradise isn't a home. It's a museum." His simple, profound truth cut through the illusion. She looked at the crystalline figures of her family, and for the first time, she saw them not as perfect, but as empty. Lifeless. Cold. She looked at Ash's warm, determined face, at Gladion's terrified but loving expression, and she knew which world she would choose. "I choose the flawed world," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I choose the pain. I choose my family. My real family." Her act of will, her rejection of the sovereign's ultimate temptation, was like a physical blow to the entity. The avatar shrieked, its perfect face cracking. The illusion shattered. "You foolish, ephemeral creatures," the avatar's voice screeched, all melodic grace gone, replaced by pure, cosmic rage. "You will be undone." It raised its hands, and the nexus behind it began to pulse violently, preparing to unleash a wave of energy that would unmake them completely. "The headset is locked on," Lusamine yelled, tapping the side of her temple. "I have the core frequency. But I need a power source. Something massive to broadcast the counter-signal." As she said it, 3 points of light tore through the dark fabric of ultra-space. They were streaks of brilliant color, yellow, pink, and red. Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, and Tapu Fini. Ash's call had been answered. The guardians of Alola had followed them into the abyss. They didn't hesitate. They formed a triangle around the nexus and unleashed their combined power, a torrent of pure, natural energy that slammed into the sovereign's nexus, momentarily stunning it. But it wasn't enough. They needed more. A conduit. A focus. Then, a fourth, even larger tear in reality opened. From it emerged a colossal, lion-like beast of white and gold, its brow glowing with the light of a captive sun. Solgaleo, the emissary of the sun, drawn by the presence of the Tapus and the crisis unfolding. It let out a roar that was not a sound but a wave of pure, solar power, and it slammed into the nexus, joining its strength with the Tapus. "Ash!" Lusamine screamed, her eyes wide. "The legendaries. Their power. If you can channel it, focus it through the headset, it would be enough." Ash looked at the clashing forces of creation and consumption, a battle of gods playing out before him. He looked at Lusamine, her face lit by the cosmic energies, and knew what he had to do. He had to become the conduit. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath. "Let's give this god a taste of an Alolan sunrise." He drew Pikachu close, their bond a perfect circuit, and prepared to channel a power that could tear a mortal man apart. Chapter 8, Dawn of a New Ether. The heart of the umbral abyss had become a battlefield of gods. The combined might of the 4 Alolan guardians, Tapu Koko's lightning, Tapu Lele's psychic grace, Tapu Fini's purifying mist, and Solgaleo's solar fury, crashed against the sovereign's nexus in a breathtaking, silent war of energy. The very fabric of the non-space around them warped and buckled under the strain. It was a storm of creation versus a tide of entropy, and for a moment, they were at a stalemate. The sovereign's avatar, its form cracking and destabilizing, let out a final, furious psychic scream. "You cannot erase an inevitability. We are the heat-death of your universe-given form. We are, finality." It was right. The legendaries could hold it back, but they couldn't destroy it. They were fighting a concept, trying to punch a mathematical certainty. They needed a different kind of weapon. "Ash, now." Lusamine's voice cut through the cosmic din, sharp and desperate. "Their power is focused. It's stable. But it won't last. You have to become the lens." Ash didn't hesitate. This was the moment his entire life, every battle, every bond, had led to. He stood between Lusamine and the clashing energies, his body becoming the focal point. "Pikachu, with me," he said, his voice quiet but resonating with power. "All of it. Pikachu." His partner's cry was not just an agreement, it was a promise, an absolute fusion of will. Ash closed his eyes and opened his soul. He didn't just reach out with his aura, he became an empty vessel, an open channel. He dropped every barrier, every defense, and invited the storm inside. The power of 4 legendary Pokémon surged into him. It was like trying to drink a river of molten sun. His nervous system screamed in protest. His vision dissolved into pure, white light. The sheer, overwhelming force of it should have atomized him, erased him from existence. But it didn't. Because his aura, honed over years of unrecorded world-saving events, was no longer just a human's life force. It was something more. It was a bridge. It caught the raw, untamed power of the legendaries and, instead of breaking, it shaped it. The torrent of divine energy was refined, focused, and channeled through the perfect, unbreakable circuit of his bond with Pikachu. From the outside, the sight was terrifying and beautiful. Ash's body became a silhouette against a blinding, sun-bright radiance. The blue of his aura turned into a dazzling, diamond-white flame. Pikachu, on his shoulder, was no longer just a Pokémon, it was a living embodiment of that power, a miniature star of pure, benevolent energy. Now, Lusamine! Ash roared, his voice now a chorus of human will and divine power. Lusamine, shielding her eyes, knew this was their only chance. She placed her hands on Ash's back, the headset she wore glowing with a fierce, blue light. She was not just activating it, she was plugging it directly into the human nexus he had become. She felt the power coursing through him, a force that defied all her scientific understanding, and funneled it into her device. The severance protocol activated. It did not fire a beam or a blast. Instead, the headset projected a single, intricate blue symbol into the air in front of Ash, a complex, multi-layered sigil that was the visual representation of the inverse frequency. It was a psychic null ward, an equation of anti-existence powered by the birth of a sun. The symbol shot forward, not with speed, but with an absolute, causal certainty. It did not strike the nexus. It passed into it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Sovereign's entire local dimension began to unravel. The inverse frequency did not destroy the Sovereign's consciousness, it cancelled it out. It was a dose of nothing injected into a universe of everything. The crystalline structures began to dissolve, not into dust, but into true, absolute nothingness. The black, star-dusted sky cracked like obsidian under a hammer. The nexus itself, the heart of the entity, began to fade, its purple light dimming as if it were being consumed from within. The avatar of Lusamine let out one final, silent, horrified scream as it dissolved into a flurry of black motes, its very concept erased. The Sovereign was not dead. A being that vast could not be killed. But they had performed a radical amputation, severing its connection to their reality so completely that it was as if the door had never existed. They had made their universe invisible to it. As the dimension collapsed around them, the Guardians acted. Tapu Koko grabbed Gladion. Tapu Lele and Tapu Fini created a protective bubble around Lusamine. And Solgaleo, its great head dipping low, caught Ash as he fell, his body spent, the divine light fading from him. Together, they plunged back through the collapsing wormhole an instant before it sealed shut behind them, leaving behind only a silent, featureless void. They emerged back into the physical world in a flash of light, landing in the heart of vast Pony Canyon. The sky above was a normal, peaceful blue. The air was warm, filled with the familiar sounds of a lowland wildlife. The psychic pressure was gone. The silence was clean. It was over. Commander Valerius and his wardens stood frozen, having witnessed the entire cosmic battle through their ship's sensors. They had seen their own ships crushed like toys, and then they had watched as a boy, a scientist, and a handful of local deities did what their entire technologically advanced organization could not. They had not just repelled the threat, they had solved it. The display on Valerius's wrist gauntlet was flashing with a single, stark message: Class 9 threat, neutralized. Source: unknown anomaly. Solgaleo gently deposited Ash on the ground. He was unconscious, pale, and breathing shallowly, but he was alive. Pikachu, exhausted, curled up on his chest, a tiny, loyal guardian. Lusamine rushed to his side, her heart pounding. The headset fell from her hair, its purpose served. She knelt, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch him, afraid of the fragility of the man who had just contained the power of gods. The psychic hook, the whispers, the cold dread she had lived with for months, it was all gone. She felt quiet. For the first time since her husband's death, her mind was truly her own. And it was this man, this impossible, stubborn, kind man, who had given it back to her. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of an emotion she couldn't yet name, streamed down her face. Valerius approached, his footsteps slow, his military bearing replaced by a profound, humbling awe. He stopped before the group, his gaze taking in the exhausted legendaries, the weary Gladion, the tearful Lusamine, and the unconscious hero on the ground. Everything he knew, every protocol he had lived by, had been rendered obsolete. His world of certainties had been shattered and rebuilt in the span of 30 minutes. He looked at Lusamine, not as a target, but as a survivor. "Your parasitic signature, it's gone," he stated, the words sounding inadequate, hollow. He then looked down at Ash. He had seen the energy readings. He knew what Ash had done, the power he had channeled. He should be dead. "He's not," Lusamine said, her voice fierce with a protectiveness that was no longer possessive, but pure. "He's just stronger than you can possibly comprehend." Valerius was silent for a long moment. He had come here to be an executioner. He had instead been a witness to a miracle. He gave a single, sharp nod, a gesture of profound, absolute respect, to the unconscious form of Ash Ketchum. "Our mission here is concluded," he said, his voice devoid of its earlier arrogance, now holding a note of something akin to reverence. He turned to his wardens. "We're leaving." Without another word, the Argentum wardens recalled their ground troops, boarded their silent ships, and ascended into the sky, vanishing as if they had been a dream. They left Alola in peace, its fate now in the hands of its own strange, powerful, and utterly unpredictable guardians. 2 days later, dawn broke over Ether Paradise. The light was soft, golden, and new. It spilled across the calm, turquoise sea and into the open balcony of the executive suite. Ash stood at the railing, leaning on it, a mug of coffee steaming in his hands. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans. He was still pale, and a deep, bone-deep weariness clung to him, but his eyes were clear, and his aura, though diminished, was a steady, calm flame, slowly regaining its strength. He had slept for nearly 48 hours straight. He heard the soft slide of the balcony door and knew who it was without turning. Lusamine stepped out to join him. She was not dressed in her usual severe white. She wore a simple, elegant sundress of soft green, the color of new leaves. Her hair was down, falling softly over her shoulders. The haunted, driven look in her eyes was gone, replaced by a serene, quiet light. She looked younger, freer. She looked like herself. She came to stand beside him at the railing, holding her own mug of tea. For a long time, they were silent, simply watching the sun climb higher, feeling the gentle warmth on their skin. The silence was not awkward or tense, it was comfortable, easy. The silence of two people who had been to the abyss and back together and had no need for unnecessary words. "The Foundation is in chaos," she said finally, her voice soft, conversational. "Wick is fielding calls from a dozen international research councils. Faba has tendered his resignation, citing health concerns, after seeing a preliminary, heavily redacted report on the energy expenditure in Pony Canyon. Gladion is, actually smiling. It's unnerving." Ash chuckled, a low, warm sound. "And you?" She took a sip of her tea, her gaze on the horizon. "I held an emergency board meeting yesterday. I told them the Ether Foundation is changing. No more secret labs, no more dangerous obsessions. We're refocusing on our original mission, protection, conservation, and ethical research. A new Ether. She turned her head to look at him, a small, genuine smile on her lips. A new beginning. He smiled back. That sounds good. Her smile faded slightly, and her expression grew more serious, more vulnerable. She looked down into her mug. The Argentum wardens, they wiped the memories of the Epsilon staff. They could have done the same to me. Erased the trauma, the memory of the Nihilego, the Sovereign, all of it. She looked up, her green eyes locking with his, clear and full of a profound, hard-won certainty. I'm glad they didn't. The memory of what I did, the monster I became. I need to carry that. It's a part of me now. Just like the memory of the man who walked into the darkness with me and led me back into the light. The air between them grew still, charged with unspoken emotion. The pretense of their arrangement, guardian and president, tool and master, had long since burned away. All that was left was a man and a woman, irrevocably changed, bound together by an experience no one else in the world could ever understand. My offer of marriage, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but clear and steady in the morning air, is still on the table. Ash's heart gave a lurch. But this time, she continued, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, a sight he never thought he'd see, it's not a demand. It's not a contract or a strategic alliance. She took a deep, shaky breath, laying her own soul bare. It's a request. A selfish one. I've spent my life trying to control everything, to possess everything I loved. But with you, I don't want to control you. I just want to be near you. I want more mornings like this. She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Ash Ketchum, will you stay with me? He looked at her, this brilliant, flawed, terrifying, and beautiful woman who had tried to conquer worlds and had instead conquered her own demons. He saw not the ether president, but Lusamine. The woman who had fought alongside him, who had trusted him, whose intellect had been as vital to their victory as his own power. The woman whose hand had fit so perfectly in his in the heart of the abyss. He had spent his life on a journey, always moving, always seeking the next adventure. He had never truly considered a destination. But looking at her now, with the rising sun of a peaceful Alola at their backs, he felt a profound, startling sense of arrival. He felt home. He didn't need to say a word. He just smiled, a wide, honest, brilliant smile that reached his eyes and filled them with light. He reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on the railing. Her fingers intertwined with his. The answer was clear, written in the golden light of the new dawn, a silent promise of a new, shared adventure just beginning. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.